They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at CozyEarth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Lords of Easy Money, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy by Christopher Leonard. Now, this is from Chapter 1. It's titled Going Below Zero, and it begins our story in 2010. Thomas Hoenig, H-O-E-N-I-G, woke up early on November 3rd, 2010, knowing what he had to do that day and also knowing that he was almost certainly going to fail. He was going to cast a vote, and he was going to vote no. He was going to dissent, and he knew that this dissent would probably define his legacy. Hoenig was trying to stop something, a public policy that he believed could very well turn into a catastrophe. He believed it was his duty to do so, but the wheels were already turning to make this policy a reality, and the wheels were far more powerful than he was. The wheels were powered by the big banks on Wall Street, the stock market, and the leadership of America's Federal Reserve Bank. Everyone knew that Hoenig was going to lose that day, but he was going to vote no anyway. Hoenig was 64 years old, and he was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, a position that gave him extraordinary power over America's economic affairs. He was in Washington that morning because he sat on the Federal Reserve's powerful policymaking committee, which met every 6 weeks to effectively determine the value and quantity of American money. Most people in America don't think very much about money, meaning the actual currency, that thing we call the dollar. The word dollar is, in fact, a slang term for American currency, which is actually called a Federal Reserve note. People spend Federal Reserve notes every day if they're lucky enough to have them, but they rarely think about the complex, largely invisible system that makes money appear out of thin air. This system is the U.S. Federal Reserve System. The Fed, America's central bank, is the only institution on earth that can create U.S. dollars at will. Because he was a senior official at the Federal Reserve, Thomas Hoenig had to think about money all the time. He thought about it in the same way that a very stressed-out building superintendent might think about plumbing and heating. Hoenig had to think about money as a system to be managed, and to be managed just right. When you ran the system that created money, you had to do your job carefully, with prudence and integrity, or else terrible things might happen. The building might flood or catch fire. This is why Hoenig felt so much pressure when he woke up that November morning in Washington, D.C. He was staying at a very nice hotel called the Fairmont, where he always stayed when he traveled from his home in Kansas City to the nation's capital. Hoenig was in town for the regular meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC for short. When the committee met in Washington, its members voted and set the course of the Fed's actions. There were 12 members on the committee, which was run by the powerful chairman of the Federal Reserve. For a year now, Hoenig had been voting no. If he tallied his votes during 2010, they would read no, 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 and no. His dissents had become expected, but they were also startling if you consider Thom Hoenig's character. He wasn't by nature anything close to a dissident. He was a rule follower. He was born and raised in a small town where he started working at the family plumbing shop before he was 10 years old. He served as an artilleryman in Vietnam, and when he came home, he didn't protest against the war. Instead, he studied economics and banking at Iowa State, earning a PhD. His first job out of school was as an economist with the Federal Reserve Regional Bank in Kansas City in the supervision department. At the Fed, he went from being a rule follower to being a rule enforcer. Hoenig rose through the ranks to become president of the Kansas City Fed in 1991. This was the job he still held in 2010. His responsibilities as one of 12 regional Fed Bank presidents illuminate the structure of America's money system. The Federal Reserve is like any other in the world. It is a crazy genetic mashup of different animals, part private bank and part government agency. People talk about the Fed as if it were a bank, but it is really a network of regional banks, all controlled by a central office in Washington, D.C. Hoenig had all the fiery disposition that one might expect from a regional Fed president, which is to say none at all. He was soft-spoken, civil, wore cufflinks and pinstripe suits, and spent his days talking about things like capital requirements and interest rates. Hoenig was an institutionalist and a conservative with the little c sense of the word. And yet here he was, in late 2010, a dissident. After he woke up in his hotel room, Hoenig had some time alone before the big day started. He gathered his thoughts. He shaved, put on a suit, knotted his tie, and gathered his papers. If he had any doubts about what he was going to do that day, he didn't advertise them. He had spent months, years, even decades preparing for this action. This vote would reflect everything he'd learned during his career at the Fed. He was trying to apply what he knew to help the Federal Reserve navigate through extraordinary times. The American financial system had broken in late 2008 after the investment bank Lehman Brothers collapsed. That moment marked a threshold for people like Thom Hartmann. Economists and central bankers described the ensuing panic as the global financial crisis, eventually bestowing the moment with its own biblical label, the GFC. The world of central banking was neatly divided into two eras. There was the world pre-GFC and the world post-GFC. The GFC itself was apocalyptic. The entire financial system experienced a total collapse that risked creating another Great Depression. The book, The Lords of Easy Money by Christopher Leonard, the subtitle, How the Federal Reserve Broke the American Economy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is the end of the week. It's Anything Goes Friday. It's you and me together for the next 3 hours. I've got a couple of stories that I just want to pop up in front of you and discuss, but broadly speaking, it's Anything Goes Friday. 202-808-9925 is our telephone number. In the first hour of the program, I want to get into how Disney shows how Ron DeSantis' attacks on Disney show how fascism progresses toward the later stages of tyranny. I think we're approaching that right now here in the United States. And also how Kevin McCarthy got busted for the big lie. This is kind of all over the news, but I just wanted to fill you in if you're not familiar with it. In our second hour, Marjorie Taylor Greene is in court right now. And I'll bring you up to date on what's going on. They're arguing that she should not be able to run for re-election because she participated in and encouraged an insurrection against the United States. This is not just about Marjorie Taylor Greene. If this court rules against her, there's 146 other Republicans that they might want to look at in Congress. And in our third hour, we're going to get into what's going on in Ukraine. The fascist conquerors just keep going when it comes to war. A Russian general, a Republican, they're kind of the same, you know. A Russian general lets slip a secret plan to invade another country and seize Ukraine's entire coastline. That would be Moldova. And I will tell you about that in detail in the third hour of the program. But I wanted to start with my opening rant here that was published over at HartmannReport.com a few hours ago. It's titled, DeSantis' Attack on Disney Shows How Fascism Progresses Toward the Later Stages of Tyranny. Some years ago, maybe even a little more than a decade ago, you pretty much can't find them anymore without paying thousands and thousands of dollars for them. But I picked up a used copy of Fritz Tyson's book. Fritz Tyson was, Tyson Steelworks is named after him, or after his family, one of the major German industrialists in the 1930s. And he wrote a book called I Paid Hitler. And it was about how he got a bunch of people together when Hitler was had the potential to come to power. This was late 1932, early 1933. He got a bunch of other industrialists together. He raised 3 million Reichsmarks, 3 million German dollars, as it were, which, you know, if you translate it through inflation and everything else, was a hell of a lot of money back then. And basically put the Nazis on the map, put Hitler on the map. Without his help and without the help of German industry, Adolf Hitler never would have been. And he wrote a book basically apologizing for this. And as a German industrialist, he understood that basically as goes business, so goes the country. And this is something that we've seen in fascist regimes over and over and over again. I mean, Mussolini was open about it, that fascism was the merger of state and corporate interests. In fact, he dissolved much of Parliament and replaced it with the Chamber of Fascist Corporations. That is, instead of districts in Italy electing representatives to go to Rome to wherever the capital is, I assume it's Rome, to represent the government or to represent their area to the federal government. Instead, the major corporations in those regions sent their representatives to to run the government of Italy. So this is not something new. And it's what Ron DeSantis tried to do with Disney. He tried to get them to, at the very least, shut up and go along with his whole don't say gay thing. And at first they did. Disney was like, oh yeah, well, we don't know. And then things got weird when people who worked at Disney were saying, hey, wait a minute, this legislation targets us and our children. Are you kidding? And so the president of Disney came out and said, okay, we don't like the Don't Say Gay bill. And all of a sudden, Ron DeSantis was like, okay, that's it for Disney. And he says that today he's going to sign this legislation that passed the Florida House and Senate day before yesterday that basically says, okay, the towns in Orange County, in the neighborhood around Orlando, the two counties around Orlando where Disney has, 40,000 acres or something? Disney has been paying for their own police and fire and garbage and everything else. And now these towns, the taxes are going to go up on the average person. I've seen numbers as low as $500 a year and as high as $2,000 a year. Now, you could argue that DeSantis is doing the same thing that Greg Abbott did, shooting himself in the foot. Greg Abbott, was holding up trucks coming across the Mexican border because he was upset with Biden about something. And it cost Texas $4 billion. I've seen numbers as high as $6 billion in delayed products, in spoiled agricultural goods, all kinds of stuff. And, this is going to cost the taxpayers of Florida dearly, but fascists don't care. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Fascists just don't care. And instead, there is a very specific logic to how fascists take power. And we saw this in the 30s in Italy and Spain and Germany. We saw this, and we're seeing it right now in India. We're seeing it in the Philippines. We saw it happen in Hungary. We're seeing it happen, it's about halfway through the process right now in Poland. We saw it happen in Turkey. We saw it happen in Egypt, where fascists just basically take over. And they always, or almost always, start out by identifying a minority group that they can demonize. And then they tell the majority group that this minority group is out to get them. Whether the minority group is trans people or gay people or black people or Hispanic refugees, people fleeing persecution down south. Whatever it may be, the message of fascists to the majority, which in the United States is white people, is these people are coming to get you or your children, which adds a whole lot of emphasis on the story. And by doing so, they're basically encouraging both legal violence and actual physical violence against these people. And what you find is that the fascists also tend to create coalitions between themselves, big business, bigoted street brawlers, and a political party that they can seize control of. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. Fritz Tyson wrote about this in his book, I Paid Hitler. He said, but he's talking about, I'm not a politician, but an industrialist, but, every now and then we have to get involved in politics. He says, in a crisis-ridden state, as Germany was, an industrialist is drawn willy-nilly into the vortex of politics. And he said, I too approve this slogan of a sound economy and a strong state. To surmount the crisis, it was necessary to reinforce the authority of the state. I believe that by backing Hitler and his party, I could contribute to the reinstatement of real government and orderly conditions, which would enable all branches of activity, and especially business, to function normally once again. Right. Well, if Disney backs away from their position and takes Fritz Tyson's position, you're going to see the same thing. Oh, yeah, okay, well, let's go back to supporting Ron DeSantis and giving money to Republicans in Florida. Tyson writes, I was just reading his autobiography yesterday, and he said, not for an instant did I imagine that it was possible. This is Fritz Tyson. He's writing in 1941. He's fled Germany by this point. He says, not for an instant did I imagine that it was possible 150 years after the French Revolution and the Proclamation of the Rights of Man to substitute arbitrary action for law in a great modern country, to strangle the most elementary rights of the citizens, to establish a tyranny in the heart of Europe, and to foster anachronistic aspirations of conquest, and world domination. And he did it. This is something that we were warned about by Franklin Roosevelt and his Vice President Henry Wallace back in April of 1944, on April 9th in the New York Times. Henry Wallace published an op-ed. He said, this is the Vice President of the United States under Franklin Roosevelt. He said, the really dangerous American fascists are not those who are hooked up directly with the Axis. The FBI has a finger on them. He says the American fascists would prefer not to use violence. His method is to poison the channels of public information. With a fascist, the problem is never how best to present the truth to the public, but how best to use the news to deceive the public into giving the fascist and his group more money and more power. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing it all over the place. You've Ron DeSantis with Disney down in Florida, Greg Abbott with trans kids and their parents in Texas. All across the country, right-wing fascist governments and legislatures trying to throw women in prison for exercising control over their bodies. You had this woman in Texas who had a miscarriage. Oh my God, it might be an abortion. Put her in prison. Charge her with murder. Life in prison. Expect a lot more of this kind of stuff, because this is what we have right now in America. We have a political party that has become a full-on fascist party. There are a few outliers, and many of them have actually left the party and claim that they're independents now, but by and large, the Republican Party has become the party of fascism, and we better wake the hell up soon, or it's not going to end well.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
If you want all the details and the links and the actual quotes, it's over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled DeSantis' Attack on Disney Shows How Fascism Progresses. And welcome back. Aaron in Susanville, California. Hey, Aaron, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I just wanted to ask you, what areas should the federal government just stay out of and leave to the states and the people?
Oh, it's a good question. In other words, what is the dividing line between the commons, the stuff that government should administer, and the private world, as it were, the stuff that government shouldn't administer? Are you trying to get in?
I'm asking basically, like, what should they let the state government? Because, like, sometimes they'll say, like, if you don't change the drinking age to 21, we'll just take away your highway funds type thing. And kind of that kind of stuff is what I'm talking about.
Oh, Aaron, that's a huge gray area. I mean, Jimmy Carter was confronted with literally not enough fuel in the United States. And so he lowered the speed limit to 55 by using federal highway funds as the weapon to do that in order to save fuel. There were states that were unhappy about that, particularly oil-producing states that largely had their own gasoline, but it was the best thing for the country. Is there some particular example that you have in mind, or are you looking for some grand principle?
Well, I think, like it seems like whenever the federal government will subsidize a state, which I think, because you talk about how blue states subsidize red states, but really should states other have to subsidize other states other than the areas that we all kind of have in common? Well, those
subsidies are mostly transfer payments. They're mostly, in the red states, you have disproportionately larger percentages of people who are on disability, who are on Social Security, who are on Medicare, and who are using Medicaid and food stamp. I mean, because poverty is so much worse in the red states. Red states won't raise their minimum wage, and in I think 12 red states now, I think we're down to, I think about a dozen more or less, still have not expanded Medicaid. So you get people who are, they don't go to the doctor, they can't afford to until it's too late, and then they get wiped out with medical expenses. and the federal government has to come in and clean up that mess. In a way, you could argue that, this is, again, all the rest of us having to take care of these red states for their, irresponsibility and just cutting taxes on rich people and screwing everybody else. But, if you're looking for a principle, my general principle is that I don't want the government making my blue jeans or my computer, but I do want the government to make sure that when I drive my car, it's not going to explode on me, and when I put money in my bank, they're not going to steal it from me. I mean, there's an appropriate role for regulation of private industry, but there's not an appropriate role in my mind for what communism does, which is where the government actually engages in the means of production and transportation.
Okay.
I don't think I'm giving you a satisfactory answer, though.
Well, I'm trying to figure. Well, this seems like one of the dividing principles between I would say the left and the right is that the right, especially since Reagan, have been saying, let's leave most of the stuff to the states and just have the federal government.
Well, no, they were saying that about integration and segregation. I mean, that was the whole states' rights thing was about how black people are treated, basically, in the states. The Republicans, the Republican Party in red states are the very first to have their hands out. That's why blue states have to subsidize them, because they are so aggressively in favor of federal assistance to them and to their people and to their businesses. So really, this whole states' rights thing was about race. Aaron, I got to run. I'm sorry. 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The recent killing of a young black man in Michigan, Patrick Loyola, who was, the police officer was sitting on his back and put a gun right to the back of his head and shot him, is just the latest example of police killing people out of traffic stops, and predominantly black people. 28% of the people who are killed in traffic stops are black, but African Americans are only 13% of our population. Police in the United States have killed nearly 600 people during traffic stops since 2017. Mapping Police Violence is the nonprofit that's been doing the work on this. About 10% just this year, about 10% of the 1,100 people killed by police this year have been killed at traffic stops. Dante Wright, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, we know their names and we know their stories, but we're not doing enough to get this under control. Other countries tend not to have this problem. We need to do something now. There's a video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. Also, the other thing I wanted to put on, I'll just flag it very quickly for you and then pick up your phone calls. Kevin McCarthy, if you've been living in a cave for the last 24 hours, a new book won't be out until a week or two from now, but they last night on Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC, they released the tapes. And this is Kevin McCarthy talking to Liz Cheney and other Republicans right after January 6th, in which McCarthy says he's going to go to Trump and ask him to resign. He's going to play the role that Barry Goldwater played with Richard Nixon. And then, of course, instead, he goes down to Mar-a-Lago and, asks Trump to bend over so he can kiss his ass, which he's been doing all along. And now this morning, it's being reported that after that blockbuster last night, that Kevin McCarthy called Donald Trump down at Mar-a-Lago, and Trump said, "Don't worry, Kevin, you're on my side now. As long as you keep sucking up to me, it's all good. You said what you said in the heat of the moment, but hey, you're on my side now, so let's just keep going." Or words to that effect. Which, by the way, Kevin McCarthy's not the first. I mean, there's a whole long list of Republicans who, after January 6th, came out and said Trump has, stepped over the line. And now they're like, "Oh, we love Trump. Yes, we love Trump. Please vote us in." So, that's what's going on. Back in 2015, by the way, this isn't the first time McCarthy has blown it. Back in 2015, when John Boehner was retiring, they had to, Kevin McCarthy was next in line, and Kevin McCarthy on TV said that the reason why they were doing the Benghazi hearings was to hurt Hillary Clinton. He was bragging about the fact that weeks and weeks of Benghazi hearings and her numbers are down in the polls. And when that came out, the Republicans figured, at least in the House of Representatives, figured, okay, we can't make this guy the leader. And so they went to Paul Ryan, who didn't want to be the House Speaker, but they said, Paul, please, you're the guy with the direct line to all the billionaires, the right-wing billionaires' money. We need somebody in charge here who's an adult. And Paul Ryan said, okay, I'll take charge. Because McCarthy had said this. One of the other things that McCarthy said, and this is pretty solid, is that he thinks that Vladimir Putin is paying Donald Trump. And let's not forget that. I mean, I think that's the most important thing he said. The fact that he said he was going to talk to Donald Trump about resigning is what's getting all the media attention. I didn't see a single media story this morning. It was prominent on Rachel's show last night, but I haven't seen a single media story this morning pointing out that Kevin McCarthy, on 2 different occasions, told his colleagues that he believed that Donald Trump was in the employ of Vladimir Putin and Russia, that he was an agent of Russia as president. He said that before the election. He said that after the election. And I think it's true, by the way. I think it continues to be true. Donald Trump continues to refuse to criticize Vladimir Putin or Russia in any way. And I don't think it's just because he hopes one day to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. I think that hope is gone. I think, frankly, he's taken so much money from Russian oligarchs over the years. He's so deeply in bed with the Russian mafia that he has no choice. He knows that, and this is why he got so hysterical about the Steele dossier, because they were getting close to him. We had a foreign agent running our government out of the White House for 4 years. It's why he shut down the cybersecurity office in the White House and let the Russians come into the Treasury Department and into the Pentagon, where they hung out for a year inside our computers, the last year of the Trump presidency. And he did absolutely nothing about it. It's why he tried to extort Ukraine.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's amazing how the media doesn't pay attention to the stuff that's like really, I think that's truly explosive. And they don't even want to have a conversation about it. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, one of my favorites. In her writings, this is from page 62, by the way, a middle-class primer is the chapter title. In her writings, which have become foundational for libertarian theology, author Ayn Rand suggested that the only purpose of government should be to prevent oppression by force. What she neglected to consider was all the force inherent in nature. If you're hungry, there is the force of biology. If you're homeless, you confront the force of winds, storms, ice, and rain. If you're sick, you confront the ravages and force of disease. These were the forces that provoked the first governments, the first communities, the first clans and tribes, the first nation states. It's easy for libertarian elitists, such as multimillionaire TV talking heads or college kids reading Atlas Shrugged, to talk about how there should be no government beyond police, the army, and the courts. They all have enough resources that they don't need to deal with the forces of raw nature. And that explains why billionaires would bankroll libertarian-leaning think tanks that will, when the crash comes with its full force, tell us it was caused by big government. However, in the real world, humans must confront both nature and other humans, which is why we create governments and why we create economies. But it wasn't until 1776, when Thomas Jefferson placed John Locke's right to life, liberty, and property, or replaced it, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that the idea of a large class of working people had the ability to pursue happiness, the middle class. It wasn't until 1776 that was even seriously considered as a cornerstone obligation to government. This is also the first time in history that the word happiness had ever appeared in any nation's formative documents, as Jefferson wrote in 1817 to Dr. John Manners, quote, "The evidence of this natural right, like that to our right of life, liberty, the use of our faculties,
The pursuit of happiness is not left to the feeble and sophisticated investigations of reason, but is impressed on the sense of every man. As Jefferson realized, with no government interference by setting the rules of the game of business and fair taxation, there could be no broad middle class. Maybe a sliver of small business and artisans, but the vast majority of us would be the working poor under the yoke of elites. The economic royalists know this, which gets to the root of why they set out to destroy government's involvement in the economy. After all, in a middle-class economy, they may have to give up some of their power, and some of the higher end of their wealth may even be redistributed, horrors of horrors, for schools, parks, libraries, and other things that support a healthy middle-class society but are not needed by the rich, who live in a parallel but separate world from the rest of us. As Jefferson laid out in his 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval, a totally free market where corporations reign supreme, just like the oppressive governments of old, could transform America, quote, until the bulk of the society is reduced to be mere automatons of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. Then begins indeed the bella omnium in omnia, which some philosophers observing to be so general in this world have mistaken it for the natural instead of the abusive state of man. Although this may come as a sudden realization to many, we've really known it all our lives. In fact, in the 6,000-year history of the civilized world, a middle class emerging in any nation has been such a rarity as to be largely historically invisible. The United States has had two great periods of what we today call a middle class. The first was from the 1700s to the mid-1800s and was fueled by virtually free land for settlers, stolen from the Indians, and free labor, slavery in the South and indentured immigrants in the North. The result was, as de Tocqueville pointed out, the most well-educated, politically active, middle-class non-aristocrats in the world. The second period didn't take hold until after World War II, during my dad's lifetime. Unlike the first, which was fueled by free land and slaves, the second had to be carefully constructed with specific and what some might define as socialist policies put in place during the New Deal, which asserted more democratic control over the economy and workplace in order to keep the economic royalists in check. To both stimulate and balance the domestic economy, FDR reinstituted progressive taxation, which gave workers more to spend and gave the rich an incentive to pay their workers better to maintain a stable workplace, since if they took the money themselves, it would just mostly go to taxes, thus stimulating demand for more goods and services. Progressive taxation has a long history. As Jefferson said in a 1785 letter to James Madison, quote, another means of silently lessening the inequality of property is to exempt from taxation all below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise. FDR eventually hiked the top income tax rate paid by the super rich in America to 90%. This had a twofold effect. First, it held income inequality in check and ushered in an era of equal income and a growth among all classes. Unlike the Gilded Age, when the economy grew at a blistering pace but the gains were afforded only to the robber barons, the period between 1947 and 1980 saw unparalleled equitable growth. During these 30-plus years, the poorest fifth in America saw a 116% increase in their incomes. The middle fifth, 111% increase. Top 5% only saw an 85% increase. All income classes shared in the prosperity of the times when the top marginal income tax rate was above 70%. The second effect of a high income tax rate was to bring stability to the economy. And then it goes through the whole explanation of how that worked. The book is The Crash of 2016.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. And welcome back. By the way, happy Earth Day. We're going to get into that in the third hour of the program as well today. So just FYI, I should have mentioned that at the opening of the show. So let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Jeff in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. This kind of goes back to your opening rant there. I don't know if you're aware that our Governor Kim Reynolds and 25 other Republican state governors have band together to form a emergency border crisis task force.
Oy.
And we don't know what that means if they're going to send. Last year,
it means just
Kim
before
Reynolds
the election, they're going to perform some kind of stunt. That's what it means.
Yeah, it's a stunt, but every news network here in Iowa is running it, and I'm sure every little paper, every Republican editorial is about the border.
Yeah.
200,000 a month showing up at the border. They never say how many are expelled or deported or anything, but it's this mass open borders, all kinds of fentanyl and drugs are coming across the border, which maybe they are, but boy, is it selling here in Iowa. And we see what they're going to run on, and I'm not hearing anything from any Democrats to, is the border open or is it just a lot of BS?
The border is not
because,
open, Jeff, I can tell you that.
Well, I mean, but that's the way it's portrayed here in Iowa, and there's no alternative to that voice.
Yeah.
And if the Democrats don't do anything here, I don't know what to say. I don't know. It's hard to stand and defend because we need a spokesman. We need somebody to get out and say, hey, this is, and give some actual numbers and go to the airwaves. Otherwise, you can kiss the Midwest goodbye.
Yeah.
It's going to turn red, and I don't know why people think that they can, the United States can win elections by New York and California. We better have some people, some states in the Midwest and stuff that vote Democrat, or this puppy's done.
I'm with you, Jeff. This is one of the hardest things to fight against. I mean, this is how Viktor Orban came to power in Hungary. Was there were Syrian refugees coming up from when Putin was bombing Mariupol and people were fleeing, and they were fleeing north into southern Europe, and they were coming into the southern border of Hungary, and Viktor Orban came out and said, I'm going to build a wall, I'm going to keep these people out, and he did, by the way, and that got him elected and got him power. It is damn near impossible, particularly when people are willing to lie and exaggerate. I mean, the number of people crossing the border during Trump's time was, not inconsequential either. And you can't completely seal the southern border. It's just, it's a near physical impossibility. And I don't have an easy solution for this one, Jeff.
Yeah, the people in Iowa, they love to have them work in their meat packing houses and things like that. So. Yeah,
it's a tough one. I don't know if anybody has a good idea for Democratic messaging on this. I'd love to hear it. I've for many years suggested that if you want to take on this issue, the place to go is not to take on the refugee, because these are refugees by and large, not immigrants. It's not to take on the refugees themselves. It's to take on companies that employ people who shouldn't be here, but increasingly. The rhetoric has gotten so hot and so hysterical, since the Trump time, that this is leading us right down that Orban path. So I'm very concerned about it. Jeff, thanks for the call. Your points are very, very well taken. And I'm sorry I don't have a glib response for you. Morris in Long Beach, California. Hey, Morris, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Professor, I need an injunction. You got to help me out with this. I need an injunction against the county administrator for this Inglewood Unified School District. Now, what's going on in this country is the privatization of public schools. You know that. And Inglewood did not get a pass. Now, they're trying to close the schools down, but check this out. The residents there passed a $240 million bond to keep those schools open and to make whatever improvements were needed. After that bond was passed, they still want to shut down the schools. We believe there's some public corruption going on over there, but we got to get in front of a judge. Now, we wanted to get an injunction. If we have $50,000, we can go to a place up here called Wilshire Boulevard in Southern California, and we can get a guy that will file an injunction for us. But we don't have $50,000. So we need somebody that you can refer us to that might work with us so that we can get this in front of a court. We believe we will get some news attention if we can get it in front of a court. And, we're just, people just going through despair. And there's no public politicians. Don't get mad at the player. Look at the game. There's no public politicians that are going to come to their rescue. And it really is disheartening. You want to talk about democracy being lost, you ought to check out the Inglewood Unified School District. The county administrator does not even have to speak to the students' parents, the residents, and none of that. Just shut down their schools, shut down their unions, whatever. So we need somebody to give us an injunction. Who do you know?
I don't know anybody. Do you live in Inglewood, Morris?
No, that's where I protest. I live in a place called Long Beach, California, but the Lord sent me out to Inglewood. They had 18,000 students are supposed to be attending the district, but they're down to about 7,000 right now. They're trying to decimate that district under the auspices of, school enrollment is going down. Well, there's another school where my kids used to go to. It's called Los Alamitos School District. They didn't go down, but you got to check out their curriculum, though. Wow. So anyway, we need somebody to step up and maybe help us, put together an injunction, get in front of the courts, and see what kind of media attention we can get, because this is sadistic, Professor. It really is.
Yeah, well, the reason I asked if you lived there was because if you did, I would say start with the mayor and the city council. I mean, you want to go to your local government agencies that might have some say in this, even if they don't have direct control over it. They have the power of influence.
I don't mean to cut you short, sir, but you ever heard of the Los Angeles Rams, the Stan Kroenke?
No.
They're in Inglewood. They bought Inglewood. The same way the owners of the Athletic A's bought Oakland, California. Inglewood, Oakland, and a lot of other black and brown communities. That's where these school closures are taking place, because the billionaires are coming in here and they're buying our public officials, and we have no voice whatsoever. We got a woman named Holly Mitchell. She is so articulate, a black woman. The Board of Supervisors, she will not speak up. We got a black mayor, Butts. He will not speak up. We got city councilmen you made reference to, people of color. They will not speak up. Don't get mad at the player. Look at the game. Everybody's on the payroll. Remember that Citizens United free speech? Well, that's how they're speaking. Y'all serve us, not your people that vote.
Wow. Not living there and not knowing the players, I don't know where to begin, Morris. But I would start knocking on doors and talking to people. I'm sorry I don't have an easier answer for that, but that would be where I'd start.
I shouldn't put that on you. You're so smart. You got so many ideas, man. It's not fair, but I thought, let me go to something.
I'm sorry, I just don't know. But I wish you well, and give us a report in a couple of weeks here if you are able to get any forward progress, or not for that matter. I mean, let us know how it's going, okay?
Talk to you later.
Okay, thanks a lot, Morris. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I absolutely love your incredible shows. I have a personal story that will give everybody some optimism.
Okay.
I've broken ties with friends that voted for Trump. I can't, it's too hard to talk to them. But one Trumpy friend I wanted to get together with for lunch, and I decided I would not bring up politics. And so we would make it through lunch. Mm-hmm. And so my friend, she's actually a sergeant in the Air Force, mm-hmm. and she works in logistics. And when she told me she would never vote for Trump again.
Really?
Yes. She brought it up. She says that she blames Trump for every single death from coronavirus.
Wow.
I was ecstatic. And so she talked to me about how strict the military was on COVID. Mm-hmm. They were in lockdown the whole time. She said she was not even allowed to leave and go see her family for Christmas. Oh. They took it seriously.
Right.
And she also, we got along so well. She confirmed with me that Biden has been shipping tons of weapons. He did it during the Olympics. Of course they're not going to broadcast and say all this. Right. So meanwhile on Fox, he's terrible. He's not doing anything. He knew when he saw those tanks surrounding. Logistics, they were getting the weapons to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another one you're going to love. She moved out of Florida because she hates DeSantis.
Wow.
He's an idiot. And this was before he went up against the beloved Mickey Mouse.
Sounds like your friend is waking up.
My husband's Trumpy family thinks DeSantis is an idiot because they love Mickey Mouse. So DeSantis, he has taken another group of people. And, Republicans exist in all the categories he's done.
Sure.
He's losing them.
He's losing them. It's great. Thank you for the good news, Jessica.
Yeah.
It's a great story for the day. Thank you. It's great to hear from you. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be in a few seconds. And we'll be right back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Fair and only slightly unbalanced.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And happy Earth Day. We'll be back with your calls in just a second. And welcome back. Wendy in Carmel, California. Hey, Wendy, what's on your mind today?
Well, first, I do want to thank you for your show. It came at an opportune time. My cable picked you up as we were going into shutdown for pandemic. And so at least my mind was fed. Thank you very much. It's back to your opening rant, and fascists just don't care. Obviously, target groups know that, right? But I want...
You mean the groups that the fascists have targeted for their hate?
Over time, yes. But rank and file don't know that. Remember how you've been talking about the profile of someone who likes an authoritarian? You know, maybe they had a tough parent. Well, I have an ex-boyfriend like that. And basically, I left my small town, you know, went to college, San Francisco, worked in Silicon Valley for a number of years. Beauty of that was autonomy and respect, egalitarian, being sought for your opinion, as well as good pay and good perks. Okay?
Sure.
I come back to my hometown, and the jobs are authoritarian, don't want to hear from you, terrible pay, maybe no perks. And what I'm basically saying is if you took that ex-boyfriend of mine from Silicon Valley and you stuck him in an authoritarian environment when he'd been used to all his freedoms, he wouldn't like it. And I think that's what we have to show. And these generations, mine, boomer, all the way through to Z, are visual. For example, recently we've been looking at Shanghai and the draconian measures the Chinese government has taken on their middle class, you know, with regards to COVID.
With regards to the lockdowns,
Yes. But what I'm basically saying is we have to make it obvious to the rank and file right that they would not be treated well in an authoritarian regime, that there are a few bigwigs who will be treated well, but the bulk of them voting for that are not going to be treated well.
I think you're going to have a real challenge doing that because what you're talking about basically are straight white people, and you know, this is what Hitler did. I mean, this is what Modi is doing in India. He's got a Hindu majority, and so he's pandering to them. In fact, he just threw a guy in jail for tweeting something about him. I mean, this is how rapidly it disintegrates, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is the visual part, I don't know if it could be Lincoln Project or what, but not going back so much in history, but if you can show, you know, current examples of dictatorships or, you know, strong men being hard on, you know, the middle, the regular folk, the bulk of their society, that would be helpful.
But generally they're not. That's my point, Wendy. And it's not until you know, somebody in the family marries somebody who's Jewish or black, or until one of the kids comes out as gay, that suddenly they discover how violent and brutal the right is. But up until that point, they think, hey, these people are they're you know, my values.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, for example, PBS had a program, a miniseries called World on Fire. And in that, they showed that not only did the Germans first go after special needs kids and, you know, the anti-Jewish fervor, but they also showed how it played on a German family, okay? And in other words, oppressive, okay? And that's what I want to show.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Wendy, thank you. That's a great suggestion. Good talking with you. We'll be right back. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Welcome back, Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's on your mind today?
Tom, thank you for taking my call. You know, we're talking about DeSantis. There was a guy on Morning Joe this morning. He's telling us $1 billion to $1.3 billion it's going to cost the Floridians of Florida to start living in that state. Can you imagine telling these 55 and older people, oh, we got to raise your rate to about $400 or $500 more a month to pay, to make up for the difference?
Yeah. Do you think has, to the best of my knowledge, DeSantis has not yet signed that legislation, although he says he's going to.
But here's the.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, here's the other thing, and then right after that, the other one I want. Oh, Youngkin. Did you hear the numbers on the election? Carl Fisk was on. Stephanie Miller.
No, I don't. I haven't heard it.
92% of the Republicans showed. You know what ours was? 68%. And what did he win by? 40,000 votes.
Right. So you're talking about voter turnout.
Right. Well, yeah. And and they think Youngkin is the next guy to be fearful of. Like he said, Carl Fisk.
Yeah,
you think we're going to sit at 68?
He's the friendly face of fascism, and you know who Youngkin? I was going off on Andrew Wheeler a couple of days ago, who's during Trump did all these terrible things to our environment when he was running the EPA. He's now running the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, I think it's called.
May I say it's something else?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Did you know, Tom? Just like your House member, there's House members they were saying in the Democratic. They are willing to work with Youngkin on voting rights, gay rights, and abortion rights.
What does that mean?
Youngkin wants to take away, voting rights, gay rights.
So he wants to take them away. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And they're willing, we're kind of flexible, Carl Fisk is saying.
So there's...
I tell you what, Tom, you got a better chance of a Democrat going to a Republican. Just like your guy. He says he's not going to take any money. You reelect him, and I'll guarantee you he'll take money. Are you guys going to still primary that guy?
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out, Russ. But you're right that corruption is not limited to one party. On the other hand, it's massive. It is the way of life in the Republican Party.
It's brutal on their side.
Yeah, and it's the exception to the rule, more or less, in the Democratic Party. And we need to clean that up. We need to acknowledge that and clean it up. Russ, thanks a lot for the call. Alejandro in Miami. Hey, Alejandro, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Yet again, our governor does another short-sighted, wants to pass another short-sighted law that's most likely unconstitutional, or at least has significant legal issues. And of course, I'm talking about the stupid proposal to dissolve the Reedy Creek Improvement District, where Disney is located. Obviously, I think it's a very bad bill. Like it's like the perfect adage is, be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. And if the district were actually to get dissolved, the residents of Orange County, Osceola County, will be left with $2 billion in debt. That's what they have to pay all the bonds that Disney owes, because the Reedy Creek Improvement District runs at millions of dollars of loss every year. So they have to, all the county residents have to absorb that debt, and they have to pay for all the services Disney has been paying to the Reedy Creek Improvement District, such as maintaining all those nice roads that go into Walt Disney World, all the utilities, the fire department, you name it, all the stuff that Disney's paying for, the residents of those counties have to pay for, and it's estimated it would cost around $1,000 per taxpayer in those counties to pay for it.
So does DeSantis have a plan B, Alejandro? Because he's saying that he's going to sign this today. Has he figured out some way to tap into federal highway funds or something that he can redirect so he doesn't have to raise taxes on people? Or is he just going to let the county government take the heat for it when they have to raise the taxes on people?
The county government will take the heat because the only roads that go through Walt Disney World are state roads, or roads that Disney owns. There's no federal funds. There's no I-75 or I-95. There's no federal highways that go through there. I don't know how they would even use that to fund it. I guess I want to illustrate the point that, like, it's so pointless, this bill, Tom, because even if this bill passes by the governor, it can't dissolve the district anyways, because, this is the problem with these short-sighted bills, that they don't understand all the legal consequences of when they pass the bill. But the point is that there's a Florida law that dictates that special districts, like Reedy Creek Improvement District, created by a legislature, can only be dissolved with, this is the kicker, with a majority vote of that district's landowners. So obviously for Reedy Creek, that's the Walt Disney Company. So this is all for show, Tom. even if this bill passes, it's not going to do anything because Disney can challenge it right away and say, "Hey, this can't be. This is not the proper way to
So it's just performance art.
It's all performance, Tom. It's all BS.
Oh God. So the taxes aren't going to go up. They're just going to have, it's masturbation. They're just going to have, they're going to have a ceremony. They're going to sign the bill. Disney will immediately challenge it in court. That'll be the end of it. It'll go away. It won't be in the news anymore, and everybody will think that Ron DeSantis got his way.
Exactly. It's all based on ignorance, Tom. As an attorney, this is just giving more attorneys money. It's going to give Disney attorneys money. It's just going to give attorneys money to fight this pointless lawsuit that shouldn't have to.
Yeah, because they don't care if they're actually successful in hurting Disney. They don't care if they're actually successful in raising taxes or lowering taxes or anything. I mean, all they care about is that it looks like they took on the big guy. Ron DeSantis, giant killer. I mean, that's one of the keys to being a successful fascist politician is being the tough guy. You got to be the big tough guy. Amazing. Alejandro, thanks a lot for that. That's I appreciate the insight. Thank you very much. Laura in Maple Valley, Washington. Hey, Laura, what's up?
Hi there, Tom. Appreciate your show.
Thank you.
My 17-year-old daughter is very interested in politics, too. We have conversation, actually, all my kids and I, but she in particular, I just dropped off her pre-registration to vote form at the Grady Way office up here in Renton. And she can vote in the primary because she'll be 18 by the time of the general in Washington.
Cool.
Anyway, the other day, she told me something that I really wanted to pass on to your listeners. We were talking about fascism, and she said, well, Mom, the thing is, Americans have been trained to have a knee-jerk bad reaction to the word communism. Like, Americans have a visceral response to the word communism. Right. Everybody knows that's bad.
Got it.
But she says, we don't have that same visceral reaction to the word fascism. It's just not been ingrained in the same way. So even in red states, even anywhere, people are like, what? No, that's not here. That was Nazis. And then they're done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she's right. I think it's a generational thing as well. Because the communist scare was really in the 70s and the 80s. That was the whole, they're going to nuke us. And the fascist scare was in the 40s. I mean, the 30s and the 40s. Right. And that generation is dying out. Laura, tell your daughter she's brilliant.
I will do.
Thank you for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. The subtitle, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. This is from the introduction titled Walking in Memphis. When he was 9 years old, my godson developed a brief but freakishly intense obsession with Elvis Presley. He took to singing Jailhouse Rock at the top of his voice with all the low crooning and pelvis jiggling of the king himself. He didn't know this style had become a joke, so he offered it with all the heart-catching sincerity of a preteen who believes he's being cool. In the brief pauses before he started singing it all over again, he demanded to know everything about Elvis. And so I jabbered out the rough outline of that inspiring, sad, stupid story. Elvis was born in one of the poorest towns in Mississippi, a place far, far away, I said. He arrived in the world alongside his twin brother, who died a few minutes later. As he grew up, his mother told him that if he sang to the moon every night, his brother could hear his voice. So he sang and sang. He began to perform in public just as television was taking off. So in a sudden swoosh, he became more famous than anyone had ever before been. Everywhere Elvis went, people would scream until his world became a chamber of screams. He retreated into a cocoon of his own construction where he gloried in his possessions in place of his lost freedom. For his mother, he bought a palace and named it Graceland. I skimmed through the rest, the descent into addiction, the sweating, gurning, stage jammering in Vegas, the death at the age of 42. Whenever my godson, who I'll call Adam, I've changed some details here to avoid identifying him, asked questions about how the story ended, I got him to duet Blue Moon with me instead. You saw me standing alone, he sang in his little voice, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. One day, Adam looked at me very earnestly and asked, Johann, will you take me to Graceland one day? Without really thinking, I agreed. Do you promise? Do you really promise? I said I did. And I never gave it another thought until everything had gone wrong. 10 years later, Adam was lost. He had dropped out of school when he was 15, and he spent literally almost all his waking hours at home alternating blankly between screens, his phone, an infinite scroll of WhatsApp and Facebook messages, and his iPad on which he watched a blur of YouTube and porn. At moments, I could still see in him traces of the joyful little boy who sang Viva Las Vegas, but it was like that person had broken into smaller, disconnected fragments. He struggled to stay with the topic of conversation for more than a few minutes without jerking back to his screen or abruptly switching to another topic. He seemed to be whirring at the speed of Snapchat, somewhere where nothing still or serious could reach him. He was intelligent, decent, kind, but it was like nothing could gain any traction in his mind. During the decade in which Adam had become a man, this fracturing seemed to be happening to some degree to many of us. The sensation of being alive in the early 21st century consisted of the sense that our ability to pay attention, to focus, was cracking and breaking. I could feel it happening to me. I'd buy piles of books and I'd glimpse them guiltily from the corner of my eye as I told myself, just one more tweet. I still read a lot, but with each year that passed, it felt more and more like running up a down escalator. I had just turned 40, and wherever my generation gathered, we would lament our lost capacity for concentration, as if it was a friend who had vanished one day at sea and never been seen since. Then one evening, as we lay on a large sofa, each staring at our own ceaselessly shrieking screens, I looked at Adam and felt a low dread. We can't live like this, I said to myself. Adam, I said softly, let's go to Graceland. What? I reminded him of the promise that I had made to him so many years before. He couldn't even remember those blue moon days, nor my pledge to him. But I could see that the idea of breaking this numbing routine ignited something in him. He looked up at me and asked if I was serious. I am, I said, but there's one condition. I'll pay for us to go 4,000 miles. We'll go to Memphis and New Orleans. We'll go all over the South, anywhere you want. But I can't do it if when we get there, all you're going to do is stare at your phone. You have to promise to leave it switched off except at night. We have to return to reality. We have to connect with something that matters to us. He swore he would, and a few weeks later, we lifted off from London Heathrow toward the land of the Delta Blues. When you arrive at the gates of Graceland, there's no longer a human being whose job is to show you around. You're handed an iPad, and you put in little earbuds, and the iPad tells you what to do. Turn left, turn right, walk forward. In each room, the iPad, in the voice of some forgotten actor, tells you about the room you're in, and a photograph of it appears on the screen. So we walked around Graceland alone, staring at the iPad. We were surrounded by Canadians and Koreans and the whole United Nations of blank-faced people looking down, seeing nothing around them. I watched them as they walk, feeling more and more tense. Occasionally, somebody would look away from the iPad, and I felt a flicker of hope, and I'd try to make eye contact with them to shrug, to say, hey, we're the only ones looking around. We're the ones who traveled thousands of miles. The book Stolen Focus by Johann Hari.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So if you haven't, welcome back to the second hour of our program, by the way. If you haven't been paying attention to what's going on with Marjorie Taylor Greene, it is fascinating, and it goes way beyond just her. She's been melting down in public for the last 5 days, almost every day, some hysterical, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this to me. The 14th Amendment, which, keep in mind, this was ratified in the late 1860s, so this was after the Civil War, and or maybe even the early 1870s. But in any case, the 14th Amendment has a provision, I believe it's Article 3, that says that you may not serve in Congress or in any elected official, or in any, the actual language is any person who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, is basically disqualified from holding public office. And, the allegation against Marjorie Taylor Greene is that that's exactly what she did. And she's having to testify under oath today. C-SPAN is carrying it. I know some of you are watching it, or some folks are watching it. Judge Amy Totenberg put together this 73-page ruling that just took apart Greene's argument. And Greene says in her lawsuit that, quote, I vigorously deny that I aided and engaged in insurrection to obstruct the peaceful transfer of presidential power. Excuse me. And the Judge Totenberg said, and I quote, Lordy, there are tapes. So here's why this is important. As much as I, would delight in Marjorie Taylor Greene not being able to run for Congress again, given that she probably will get reelected because she represents one of the most backward counties in Georgia, or areas of Georgia, which itself is a little backward. It's really not about her. It's really about whether the 14th Amendment still can bite, whether it still has legal force. And here's the thing, if the judge rules against Greene, and then that gets upheld on appeal, which will, there's two more levels of question here of, federal appeal court and then the U.S. Supreme Court. But if it gets upheld on appeal, that means that quite a few Republican members of Congress may no longer be able to run for Congress, including, and not just members of Congress, including Donald Trump. I mean, this could apply to him as easily as to anybody else. So this is not a small issue. Keep an eye on this one. I think you're going to find it fascinating. All right, picking up your phone calls. It's Anything Goes Friday. Pam in Chicago. Hey, Pam, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, there's a lot on the table. Tom, I'm concerned about the messaging. And every time you have Congressman Pocan, right? Mm-hmm. People inevitably talk about messaging. And it just seems to me that what in the world is Biden's communication team doing? Because I know here in the black community, there are some real frustrations that Biden isn't fighting hard enough, Tom, regarding voter suppression, oppression, and just out-and-out cheating to collapse, black representation. And we're feeling it out here, and I'm hearing it. So I don't know what his communication team is doing. However, I think he needs to do more media outreach to your show, independent media, and particularly black and Latino media. And he needs to start now. I don't know what campaign season is. As soon as he got in office, Tom, it was campaign season.
Right.
And we see how ruthless and vindictive these Republicans can be. And, so the statement is, well, when they go low, we go high. But I caution elected officials with that, because when you tell the truth about the despicable behavior of Republicans, it sounds like you're going low, Tom, when all you're doing is telling the truth and exposing the lie.
That's what Harry Truman said. He said they say I'm giving them hell, but I just tell the truth and they think it's hell.
And that's what it is. If we tell the truth, it just sounds like it's going low.
But here,
so at this, I'm
go
sorry.
Ahead. No, finish your thought. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
At this point, they need to reach out to black media, other alternatives in media, and tell the truth and tell people exactly what you've done. And don't be afraid to criticize the Republicans on the truth. Biden can't see these people as his friends, Tom. At this point, I look at people who support the Republican Party and Trump. I look at them differently. And we don't have a Republican Party, a two-party system. We have the Democratic Party and some other parties, and we have a fascist, for me, hate group.
Yeah.
And if we can't use fascists, we've got to tell the truth. But I don't know what his communication team is doing. I wish I was on it, Tom, because I'd have some serious recommendations.
I wish you were too, Pam. I wish you were too. Let me just put a punctuation mark on what you're saying, an exclamation mark, in fact. This was reported by Carrie Elveld over at dailycoast.com this morning, but it's the result of a survey, a new poll that was just done by the Progressive Consortium Navigator Research. They're a polling firm. And what they found was that only 3 out of 10 registered voters in America know that the U.S. gained jobs this last year. 3 out of 10. 70% of Americans. I mean, in fact, 17% of, this is all registered voters, 17% said that we lost as many jobs as we gained. 24% weren't sure. 29%, a third of all voters, said that last year the country lost jobs. And 70% of voters either got it wrong or didn't know. Biden is 15 points underwater in his handling of the economy, and this is the best economy we've had in my lifetime. I mean, or since the 60s anyway, since the mid 60s. And I'm with you, Pam. They are not, out there beating their drum. They're not waving their flags. They're not telling people what's going on. Donald Trump, even when the economy was going south, went out every day and said, "Oh, it's the best economy it's ever been." Now, he was off in line, but he was at least, or at least he was.
Said it.
Yeah, he was promoting himself. And, I'm sorry, but this, it's nice to have politicians. We went through this also with President Obama, who are just kind of quietly doing good work in the background and making things happen. And yeah, a lot of people are like, yes, there's great dignity in that. And we have a lot of respect for that. But this is the era of the Music Man. This is the era of the need for somebody to get out there and beat their drum. It's P.T. Barnum time, and Trump understood that.
And you've got to be seen fighting for your base.
Yes.
I mean, that just has to be ever present. And lastly, Tom, I'm going to say Howard Dean, I believe it was, right, had it right. Where was the 50-state strategy? That should have been just in the heads of all Democratic elected officials and the party leaders.
Well, and they ran out of money is the problem. I mean, but yeah, I'm completely with you, Pam. And
lastly, Tom, let me make this comment. I'm at the point where I'm almost having as much disdain and for the wealthy people as they have for the poor. Because I'm here in Chicago, and I see what Amazon is building, a new facility. You know, they're going to be fighting, you know, the workers for union jobs. But I'm also seeing how our wealthy people are running elections for mayor. We have that coming up. We have Mayor Lori Lightfoot in now. I love the way she handled the pandemic. She made some missteps, but she stood up to Trump and most of the corruption. I'm concerned that if we get other people in office, they won't fight for working class people. They won't stand up to Trump and Trump-like individuals. And DeSantis, we know the corporate media is going to try to make his name a household word.
Oh, they are. They already are. DeSantis is going to be the next Trump. I am predicting that DeSantis is going to be the guy running for Republican in presidential nomination in 2024. Pam, thank you. Yes, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to get the word through to the Democratic Party. Start bragging about your successes, and do it often, do it daily, do it across multiple platforms. Get the damn word out there.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Or I should say, get the good word out there. Damn it! We'll be back 16 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. And let's see here. Oh, Tim in Mattawan. Where's my mouse? There it is. Tim in Mattawan, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
I would like to say that when we allocate money to go to Ukraine, it actually goes to defense contractors, and they make a healthy profit on the equipment that they send over there.
That's
I think that they should put some skin in the game and give us a deal. And I'll bet you the price went up.
Yeah, I'm guessing everything you're saying is true, Tim. What do you suggest we do about it?
I just want to bring that up. I think if people knew about it, they might, Biden might decide to ask for a better deal, but quickly. I don't want it to hold things up.
I think this kind of falls into the category of, we're stuck with it. I mean, that this is the way things are. This is what Dwight Eisenhower, if you can turn on the 360, Sean, or excuse me, on my computer, if I can play audio out of my computer. This is what Dwight Eisenhower had to say about this in December of 1961, or 1960, excuse me.
We have been compelled to...
Oh, here, hang on just a second. Let me back up a little bit.
But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national...
Oh, in fact, back it up even a little more.
American makers of plowshare.
Yeah, here's the beginning.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry.
It's amazing to think about, isn't it?
American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment.
And then he warns
We
us.
annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society.
And then he goes into the whole thing about, we have to keep an eye on this industrial complex, the military industrial complex. And he was absolutely right, and it's what you're talking about. But during a time of war, when we're trying to get now FDR came out and said, I don't want to see one new war millionaire happen. I suppose that would be a possibility. Is that what you're talking about?
I think that they should at least be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be good. It would be a good time to audit some of these things and to have a conversation about how the military-industrial complex is treating America. I'm with you, Tim. Thanks a lot for the call. Yeah, thank you. Good talking to you. It is 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. In just a moment. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. I don't know if you caught this, but there was a piece of legislation before the House of Representatives that explicitly required the U.S. State Department to preserve any evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine, to gather reports of it, to preserve it, presumably in anticipation of some sort of a war crimes prosecution. And for reasons I can't quite figure out, maybe you have an idea, 6 Republicans voted against this. No, we don't want the war crimes of the Putin administration to be. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Warren Davidson from Ohio, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and Paul Gosar from Arizona. I'm scratching my head here. Why would these 6 Republican politicians not want us to preserve the war crimes evidence? There's a video about this that you can see over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday, picking up your phone calls. And Steve in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
I guess I wanted to join in with the theme of Ron DeSantis is stupid.
I don't think he's stupid. I think he's dangerous.
Well, I agree with that too. I think everything he's done as governor has been for one purpose, without consideration of the people of Florida or the impact, short-term or long-term. Everything has been for his own political gain, to raise his profile, for a run for the White House.
I agree.
I can't help but think of the close election that he won, because Andrew Gillum was a very good candidate when he was running against DeSantis. He had him, I think, in the debates. He had him off his game. He just outdid him, I think, and that's what brought the turnout in the state of Florida for the Democrats, because Gillum was a good candidate. Now he had those personal issues, but he made mistakes in a hotel in Miami that affected him and his family. Ron DeSantis has made decisions as governor that have had way more negative effects on way more people as governor.
Well, also, didn't Gillum's little scandal come out after the election was over?
It did, yeah, it did.
So that was not a factor in the election. How close was that election in Florida? I don't recall.
It was like less than 2%.
Wow.
Yeah, less than 2%. It was very, very, very close. But he was a good candidate. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, this power play that he's doing with Disney.
Mm-hmm.
If you consider, do you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the data scientist that spoke out publicly and said that the numbers were cooked and that she was being pressured?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
I do, yeah. This woman, she got fired. She continued doing the spreadsheets from her home. They tried to shut her down. They tried to arrest her.
And he sent the state troopers to her house at 2:30 in the morning.
Yep. And stole her computers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the same kind of.
This is what the Gestapo does. That's what I'm telling you. Well,
it's the same kind of calculus that he's factoring with Disney. It's just short-sighted, without consideration. I'm gonna run for the president no matter what I do to the state of Florida or who gets in my way.
Right.
And people need to wake up and realize it. It's not going to be good for Florida. Rick Scott had similar thinking with the unemployment benefits. He made snap decisions without long-term consideration, and by the time the fallout came, DeSantis inherited it, and then those two hardly speak anymore because he had to kind of pick up Scott's mess while he was scot-free in the Senate.
Right. Right.
He didn't have the responsibility. It's not the GOP is not good government. I grew up in Florida, living in the Space Center district, and my parents were. I guess they embraced the GOP because they funded the Space Center, and so they had a loyal base there. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same. It is not the same.
No, today's Republican Party is not. No. My dad's Republican Party or your parents' Republican Party, Steve. It has become a neo-fascist organization, plain old, straight out, flat up. That's it. Steve, thank you for the call. And thanks for sharing your thoughts from Florida. Ron in Oaks, North Dakota. Hey, Ron, how's North Dakota? What's on your mind?
Good. How are you, Tom?
I'm well.
I know how you are.
We have just a minute, though, to the break. So what's on your mind?
Okay, quickly. I admire the President Obama finally getting out and talking about misinformation, and I hope he keeps that up because we really need something to motivate voters.
Yeah, he gave a hell of a speech. I only saw one show play even any small part of it, though, which was really disappointing. It should be all over the media.
Yeah, it should be. But I agree with Pam from Chicago, the guy from Iowa that called in, and this is kind of the theme of the program today, that, number one, do away with or address the Republican misinformation, and number two, remind voters what Biden has done so that we don't lose the House and the Senate. The House, I'm very pessimistic on. I think there's still a chance to keep the Senate. But,
I agree with your analysis. I completely agree. Yeah, Ron, thank you. Thank you very much for, putting your punctuation mark on all these conversations. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It is Anything Goes Friday, right here on the place with talk media for the rest of us. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by John Pavlovitz. It's titled, If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. This is from the introduction titled, You Had One Job. If you want a good laugh, Google the phrase, you had one job. The results are hilariously tragic parade of seemingly impossible fails, unfathomably poor planning, and face-palming inducing human error. A piece of melted cheese on top of a fast food burger bun. The word stop misspelled on a street crossing. A keep to the right sign with its arrow facing left. A toilet lid inexplicably installed below the seat itself. It's strange stuff. Seeing these stupefying train wrecks and task execution tends to elicit two responses. Usually making you feel a little bit better about yourself while simultaneously wanting to track down the culprits in an effort to understand how they managed to neglect the primary duty assigned to them. We begin to speculate. Were they temporarily distracted? Did they not properly comprehend the instructions? Did they feel as though someone above them in the chain of command dropped the ball? Were they just plain lazy? When people miss the point so spectacularly, we want to know how and why. Because that kind of failure feels impossible from the outside. It seems unfathomable to get the main thing wrong, and seeing it happen sparks our curiosity. I imagine Jesus knows well the curiosity that comes with watching people give clear direction lose their way. As a longtime Christian by aspiration, if not always in practice, I often envision an exasperated Jesus coming back and the first words out of his mouth to his followers as his feet hit the pavement being, "You had one job, love. So what happened?" I wonder what massive wave of excuses and rationalizations would come flooding from the mouths of the faithful multitude in front of him, how they might justify their mistreatment of the assailed humanity in their care, the verbal and theological gymnastics they'd attempt to avoid culpability for their own cruelty. Would they stridently recite him a verse from Leviticus? Would they blame the liberal media for morally corrupting America? Would they talk about people's wicked lifestyle choices? Would they argue that they were loving the sinners in their midst, but simply hating their sin? Would they frantically offer up the same platitudes and parrot back the same partisan talking points that they've gotten used to brandishing on social media and proffering in Sunday school classes? And if all else failed to convince him, would they quote Jesus to himself in a desperate Hail Mary effort to pass the buck to him for what they did or failed to do while supposedly standing up for him? And there, fully seen in the piercing gaze of the namesake of their very faith tradition, with all their justifications and excuses exhausted and only their fully exposed hearts left, would any of their responses be sufficient reasons for refusing to love? When that was the singular task and primary commandment that he left them responsible for tending to? In my less compassionate moments, I admit that I like to picture it not going well for them. I know it's far less than admirable, let alone Christ-like. But some days my heart strangely warms at the possibility of a few billion brimstone-breathing evangelists, sanctimonious conservative politicians, and plank-eyed judgmental Christian neighbors all having to explain themselves in a sanctified flop-swept moment they can't exegete or gaslight themselves out of, and they all get what they have coming to them. But my self-righteous revelry doesn't last long. The mirror calls me out as I remember what I think I know about Jesus, and that rescues me from full-blown, unabated hubris. I begin to wonder what my excuses might be, how I'd spin the enmity I manufacture here, what story I'd come up with for not doing the one task we both know compromises a disciple's job description. And if I really believe what I'm supposed to believe, are any of my justifications sufficient? If God is love, and if Jesus is the perfect expression of that love, and if I'm supposedly trying to follow that Jesus, how could I be so love impaired so frequently? How do I miss the singular point so consistently? It's not as if I didn't know what I was signing up for, like some lengthy online user agreement I blindly accept in haste, missing the bombshell fine print underneath. Having read the Gospels a few million times, give or take a few 100,000, I know the primary commandment is not something I need to excavate from cumbersome layers of foreign language translations and cultural mores of the time. Jesus himself clearly laid out the most important commandment for me and for everyone who's ever cracked open a Bible, and even most people who've never cracked open a Bible. And so we'd all understand what's being asked of us going in, so there would be no post-altar call buyer's remorse or deathbed claims of a sucker punch, bait and switch. Loving God and neighbor and self is the elemental stuff of Christian prayers, songs, t-shirts, and bumper stickers, and we know that. But as the master Morpheus said to protege Neo in the first and only truly great Matrix film, there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Love is the path that Jesus laid out for us. The book, John Pavlovitz's If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Hey, have you noticed that people are basically imitating Donald Trump all over the country? We're seeing all this rude behavior, sexist, racist behavior. People getting arrested at airport gates, airplanes being turned around because people are fighting with flight attendants, disorderly, rude, unhinged conduct. I mean, it's just gone nuts. Car crashes are up, gun deaths are up, shootings are up. Healthcare workers are being literally physically assaulted in some hospitals. They're having to put together panic buttons. This kind of behavior in our schools is increasing. It looks like, according to some sociologists, psychologists, and even business consultants, it looks like a lot of this ties back not just to the Trump presidency, with Donald Trump providing us with an example of how to be, an obnoxious person, but also the crisis of the pandemic. We've got a deeper dive into this topic over at ThomHartmann.com. There's a great video about it. You can check it out there. And welcome back. What a day, huh? It is Anything Goes Friday, picking up your phone calls. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's on your mind today?
Oh, well, Memorial Day's coming up here in another month, and I was just thinking that with DeSantis growing his little Hitler mustache, you can kind of see evidence of it on recent videos. I'm just thinking maybe a warning going out to all the Republican fascists that when you go decorate graves, kind of avoid the ones of your great-grandparents that were called the greatest generation, because they gave everything to stop fascists, and you're welcoming them with open arms in our own country. So just maybe, if you were to be near one of those graves, and if it was possible, a ghost might reach up and just grab you by the ankle and drag you under.
Yikes. You've been watching too many scary movies, Sandra, but I agree with your sentiment. I agree, absolutely agree with your sentiment. My dad, when he got out of high school, immediately signed up for the Army because he wanted to go fight fascists. He was an anti-fascist.
Yeah.
And
there were people that were 13 and 14 and 15 years old who lied about their age so that they could join and stop fascists.
Yeah, he was 17 when he did, but absolutely, same deal. And that entire generation, I think my dad was born in 1929. I mean, that entire generation, maybe 31. I mix him and my mom up, but anyway, that entire generation were anti-fascists, and yet Republicans walk around going, oh yeah, those anti-fascists, the Antifa people, they're just terrible. Yeah. It's bizarre. Yeah. Sandra, I'm with you. Very well said. Thank you so much for the call. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, how's our numbers guy today?
Hi, just fine. This comment, a vote for Republicans is a vote to destroy democracy.
Yes, sir.
They can also add, a vote for Republicans is a vote to give us another recession, since this is what happened every time a Republican got a recession, got a first term in the White House, he gave us a recession. Mm-hmm. And that's actually more true than a vote for Republicans is a vote to destroy democracy, because you can go back again 124 years, and this has been true with every Republican that has ever come to power. And one of the things that fascists enjoy is they have the license to lie, and the little Republicans, the guys who vote for them, actually see that as a superpower.
Yep.
That their guy can get out there and tell a blatant, bald-faced lie and survive. Yep. No Democratic member can do that. The media would just rip them to pieces. There wouldn't be anything left of them if they were to get out there and start lying the way the Republicans.
Well, and not just the media, their own people. I mean, look at what happened to Al Franken. And he wasn't even lying. I mean, he was set up.
One of the reasons why Donald Trump, who was known to be a Democratic member, one of the reasons why he decided he was going to go for the Republican nomination is because he knew, the big racist liar that he was, that there was no way he would survive as a Democratic member. So he decided, hey, I can go, and he watched what right-wing talk radio has done for 30 years. And they have done nothing but lie, and our media just ignores it. Mm-hmm. They act like right-wing talk radio doesn't exist. And they got away with it until George W. Bush started putting those lying right-wing radio hosts in his administration. And then it became mainstream, and now we have a situation where CBS, ABC, and to some extent NBC now puts those same liars on their program as if they're telling the truth. I was watching Bloomberg the other day, and Grover Norquist, whatever his name is, he got on there and claimed that when Newt took over Congress in 1994, it was actually 95, but he claimed that he forced Clinton to lower the capital gains tax, and that's the reason why Bill Clinton had such a good economy. It was a blatant, bald-faced lie. Now, the thing about it is, the guy who was interviewing him had put a question to him. So if tax hikes for the rich hurts, then how did Bill Clinton have such a good economy? And that's when Grover told that blatant, bald-faced lie. Yeah. I know it was a lie because I remember everything that happened during the Clinton years. But these Republicans are allowed to tell lies, and these lies last for decades. And so when you sit back and everybody's trying to figure out how is Biden going to get by all of this, how is he going to get out there? You have to recognize that there are what's something like 95% of all of right-wing lying radio is out there telling the people the exact opposite of what is true. Right.
Yeah, this is the lesson that Reagan taught the Republican Party. That, you know, he could go out there and say, oh yeah, if we cut taxes on rich people, it'll increase tax revenue. It'll stimulate the economy. Oh yeah, if we cut taxes on big corporations, they're going to pay you better. If we just get rid of unions, your income is going to go up. I mean, these were not just lies. We had 100 years of American history demonstrating over and over and over. I mean, he was selling the same crap that was being sold by in 1920 by Republicans, and it was obviously lies, and yet he got away with it. In fact, he got himself reelected, and ever since then, Republicans have been going, "Hey, this works."
And that's the problem that we have today. Is we have two Democratic members who, for the most part, are pretty good, except for they perpetuate those lies. One of them is a multimillionaire because he's making a lot of money off of coal, so he has a reason to tell these lies. And the other one, I have no idea what's wrong with that woman. I really don't have any idea what's wrong with that woman.
She's taking money from the Koch network, and she's taking money from right-wing billionaires, let's say, according to Politico. And the pharmaceutical industry, you know, when she blew up Build Back Better, which would have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices, pharmaceutical industry ran over $1 million worth of ads in Arizona telling everybody how wonderful she was. I call that a quid pro quo.
If the American people want to get rid of this sort of behavior by these Democrats and also get rid of the Republicans that's destroying our country, what they need to do is, back when before Obama became president, myself and a whole lot of other people were calling right-wing talk radio, and we were flooding them with the truth. We literally frustrated them so much that they started banning us, basically banning us.
Now they don't let those calls go on the air.
Yeah, but no, you can still get through sometimes if your name is not known. I can't call them anymore because they literally on the air banned me for life.
Yeah,
but
you need to get some burner phones, Larry. Get some burner phones, Larry. I got to move along, but thank you.
I did.
It's always great to hear from you, and you always have a really good, positive contribution to the program. I'm very grateful. Thank you, Larry, for the call. Steve in Poulsbo, Washington. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
The Supreme Court. Oh, and I shouldn't even call them that. Yesterday, Brown versus Davenport, they took down largely the Great Writ, habeas corpus.
Tell me about it. I missed this story altogether. What happened?
And the best place to find it would be Above the Law.
Okay.
And it's about it.
Was this a shadow docket case or an actual decision? Because usually the
actual decision.
Okay.
And Kagan went kind of nuts for her. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's very reserved, but the first time she clearly criticized the Republicans on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was about is the writ of habeas corpus, the Great Writ, comes us from 1540s from England, where a court can say, give us this prisoner, should they be rightfully and wrongfully confined.
Right.
And what the Republican majority of the court said was that this writ does not apply to state court issues unless you go through a series of hoops that were imposed by the law, by a law that they changed in the 1970s to further the death penalty. And it's ridiculous that you can pass a law to begin with that says you're limiting the Constitution.
Right. The writ of habeas corpus is literally written into the Constitution.
Yes, it is. And it cannot be suspended. I think it's Article 1.9 or something. But you can't be suspended except in times of war.
Correct.
Well, the Anti-Terrorism Act and Death Penalty Act limited it. The Supreme twice before has looked at it and said, we have a test, and it's called Brecht, but that's a small thing. But that says when this applies, and all the law can do is make it easier. Can't make it any harder than the Constitutional,
Right. So what's the case, Steve? I need to look this up and pay some attention to it.
Brown versus Davenport.
Brown versus Davenport, yesterday in the Supreme Court. Okay, great. I will do my homework. Steve, thank you for the call, and thanks for the flag on that. I'm telling you, it's such a privilege to hang out with you people every day, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, with some of the smartest minds in the country and people who are just understanding what's going on. You're great. Thank you so much for listening to this program. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's your media support group for we the people of the United States of America. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Paul in Seattle. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Been hearing a lot about whether or not the Russians are committing genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is that might be true, probably is, but their real plan is more like Hitler's plan, where he wanted Lebensraum. And what they're doing is more like ethnic cleansing, where they're going into Ukraine, taking over this horribly fertile land that they've been after for a long time, and killing as many as they feel like, I guess. And then they're also deporting a lot of people through Russia.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think that
several 100,000 so far, apparently. Isn't ethnic cleansing just another way of saying genocide? I mean, wasn't that the decision at the Milosevic trial?
It's possible, but the other thing is that ethnic cleansing implies that they're taking the land for their own use and they're going to repopulate it with Russians from Russia after they deport all the Ukrainians that they can. And after that, who knows where these Ukrainians are going, maybe to a new gulag system.
Well, the two things that I'm hearing are that they've got what they call exfiltration camps in Russia, where people are first going, number one. And number two, that the Ukrainian children are being separated from their parents and basically sold to adoptive parents in Russia.
Right. And
which
the
is
whole thing
amazing. And you'd think QAnon would be all over this because they're all about the children, right? But no, not so much.
The thing is that what they're doing is maybe they need slave labor in Siberia, or, they have a lot of Russians that don't want to live
they
in
actually
Siberia,
are. They
move them to.
It is documented that some of the people that were taken from, I'm forgetting which town now, but some of the people who were taken from one of those Ukrainian towns actually have shown up in Siberia. They are actually being sent to places where people don't want to go. And so basically they're like prison camps, because they still need to extract the resources there. They're drilling or mining or whatever it may be. And they're sending Ukrainians to these places.
Resources.
Pardon?
Tremendous forest resources, too. But
yeah.
At best, I think the Ukrainians that are being sent to Siberia would be indentured servants, but more likely, concentration camp type slave labor in a gulag.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an evil situation, Paul.
It's a little different motivation by Putin. It's that he's not necessarily interested just in killing Ukrainians because he wants their labor and he wants their land for the Russian people.
It's called the spoils of war. And he feels that he's entitled to that. And the fact of the matter is that for the 22 years that he's been president of Russia, for much of that time, and frankly, even before that, I mean, when he went after Grozny, when Chechnya tried to break away, I mean, that was before he was president. That was where he made his chops, was mass slaughter, reducing a town to rubble. And this is the guy who we should put in charge.
And possibly setting up those bombings in a theater in order to give him power.
Oh yeah, that was what began the whole Chechen thing, and yes, there is speculation that was not necessarily even the Chechen separatists. Paul, thank you for the call. Grim times we live in. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back, picking up your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Matt in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I got an explanation for DeSantis supposedly ignoring raising the taxes on the Orlando area.
Right.
I think it's a fine by him, a punishment, because Orlando went by 100,000 votes for the Democrats in 2020.
Oh, my God. The penny drops. So Osceola and Orange counties are blue counties?
DeSantis can't wait to fine those people $2 billion. They're Democrats.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. Of course, it makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think of it myself. Brilliant.
All I got, Tom. That's all it is.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much. It's grim news, but it's good to, know these things. Thank you. Brenda in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Hey, Brenda, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to talk about the Democrats need to get their message out more. Mm-hmm. The Democrats get their message out. It's just not covered.
Yep.
Point in being, you heard a great speech by Obama. Why wasn't it on the news?
I agree. And he's a former president just like Trump. And Trump sneezes and it gets wall-to-wall coverage for 3 days. Obama comes out and gives a speech in which he explicitly calls the Republicans essentially fascists. And it's crickets.
Right, and the other way of doing it is when you have someone in the government on like Spokane, or if I'm getting his name right, okay, this is what the news media does. Well, the Democrats just don't get their message out. And then the Democrats turn around and say, that's right, we have to do a better job. No, they start saying, and why aren't you putting it out?
Right. Yeah, this is like with the Sunday shows. I mean, for years and years and years, I've been complaining about this since I started this show back in 2003. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Republicans. I mean, they say, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. No, it's Meet the Republicans. And when George W. Bush was president, the majority of the Sunday show guests were Republicans. And when Media Matters called them out on it, they said, that's because the Republicans are in power and people want to hear from them. So then Obama becomes president and the Democrats take the House and the Senate, and the majority of the Sunday show guests are still Republicans. And again, Media Matters goes to the big networks and says, how come, you're featuring Republicans again? And they go, the Republicans are not in power. And so people want to hear from the opposition. The bottom line is that the corporate interests are better served by the Republican Party, at least short term, than they are by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is looking out for the little guy, that's looking out for the average person, it's looking out for people who want to be in unions, it's looking out for minorities and people who are facing challenges in the society. The Republican Party is looking out for wealthy people, white people, and basically those in power, which includes the executives and the multimillionaires that you see on television, on the television networks. So it shouldn't surprise any of us that when you've got a multimillionaire host in a network with multimillionaire CEOs and billionaire owners, that you're going to have mostly Republican guests. And you're not going to hear the Democratic talking points this week.
Well, the Democrats just have to start saying, and why aren't you putting that message out? Don't say another thing. Say, yes, we get our message out, so why aren't you covering it?
They need to do the old Lee Atwater thing and work the refs. They need to start talking about the conservative media bias in the United States, and they need to start screaming about it. I'm with you. Brenda, thank you. That was brilliant. Karen in Winter Haven, Florida. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind today?
Well, you know, Tom, I'm about 30 minutes from Disney World, but there's a point here that, well, there's 2 points that nobody is picking up on, no reporters, nothing. Reedy Creek District, which Disney controls, is largely conservation lands and so forth, which Disney has the Nature Conservancy doing the administration for. And they want, big developers would love to get their hands on that land. So Ron DeSantis is just trying to do a favor for his developer friends with a land grab if he can do it. And the other thing too is Disney is in the process of moving their headquarters from California to Orlando, and those are the high-paying jobs that Disney has. And it's going to be a big boon to the economy there in Orlando. And so DeSantis could put the kibosh on all that. To have high-paying jobs around Orlando is a rarity.
Interesting.
Yes, and so, and plus, listen to his language. He says, "Oh, well, we don't want this California corporation." They're down on California. They're down on, Fauci. I mean, anybody that makes any sense. So they're just, you have to really kind of follow the money, dig deeper. They live on kickbacks. And they live on Russian money, and that's what they're up to.
The Republicans in Florida. Now, you live in Florida, Karen. You live in Winter Haven. What's your sense of the average Floridian? Are they buying DeSantis' stuff?
Unfortunately, my area is pretty fascist, but I'm lucky enough to have been put into a progressive Democratic representative's district finally, and that's the other thing, the maps that he drew. I'm afraid I might lose that great congressman and have to go with a fascist they elect out of Lakeland.
Yeah.
But Orange County is blue, and Osceola is blue too, mostly.
Right. So DeSantis is. So by changing the tax law, everybody is like, oh, DeSantis is shooting himself in the foot because local taxes are going to go up. Local taxes are only going to go up in the 2 blue counties in the middle of Florida.
Right.
Probably the only 2 blue counties in the middle of Florida.
Right. And, that Reedy Creek also is the headwaters of the Kissimmee River.
Right.
You don't want to do anything to despoil those waters.
Right. But they would love to build a development there or something. I get it. Karen, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back. We do have a guest about Earth Day. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price, too, for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never, ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the fourth stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is, irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. Yet the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is, to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that storm certainly hit black folk, but it hit white folk too. This is the sordid version of reverse American exceptionalism. It is the same Me Too impulse that flares in the bitter battle against affirmative action. Beloved, I can't help but notice that affirmative action is the bee in so many of your bonnets. You look around in your classrooms and you think every black person is there because they got an unfair shake from the system. You look at your job and you think that your black coworker got an unjust nod of approval from the powers that be. You never stop to think how the history of whiteness in America is one long scroll of affirmative action. You never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. You never stop to think that most of our presidents never rose to the top because they bested the competition just the white competition. White privilege is a self-selecting tool that keeps you from having to compete with the best. The history of white folk gaining access to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale is the history of white folk deciding ahead of the game that you are superior. You argue that slots in school should be reserved for your kin because, after all, they are smarter, more disciplined, better suited, and more deserving than inferior blacks. That's like concluding that the Cleveland Cavaliers can't possibly win the NBA championship because they're down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Throw in the towel and call it a series. But they must play the series to determine the winner. Whiteness is having all the advantages on your side. The referee's blowing the whistle for you. The arena packed with only your fans. In fact, whiteness means you never even have to play the game at all, at least not in head-to-head matchups with the talent and skill of black folks. Here's We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is Batamia Coronel, the senior national organizer with Climate Justice and the Center for Popular Democracy, populardemocracy.org and cpdaction.org, or the websites PopDemoc on Twitter and CPD Action on Twitter. Batamia, welcome to the program. Tell us about the Day of Action. Today is Earth Day, but the Day of Action is tomorrow. Tell us what you're all are doing. What's planned?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Today is Earth Day, as you said. What better way to celebrate our Earth than to bring the energy that we need directly to the White House to push and encourage the Biden administration, the Senate, Congress, to pass the historic federal legislative package that we've all been waiting for. We're hoping to get thousands of people tomorrow in Lafayette Park to bring the message loud and clear to President Biden and the rest of Congress. We want and we need investment in equitable transition to renewable energy. We want and need dignified union jobs. We need reduced costs of essentials such as drugs, schooling, healthcare. We need improved conditions and pay for care workers. And we need to be cleaning up the toxic air and water pollution in frontline communities. And we hope to really hear from the White House that they're ready to deliver on the promises that they ran on in 2020.
So, Batamia, it sounds like what you're describing is Build Back Better, and that legislation, passed the House of Representatives, but it couldn't get past Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and every single Republican in the United States Senate. There are stories out there that Joe Manchin's willing to negotiate. He's willing to give a little if he gets a little, and God only knows what he wants to get. Is that what you're talking about? Let's resume negotiations with Manchin, and maybe we can bring along another Republican so we can get around Sinema? Or is there brand new legislation coming out of the House, or are you talking about things like executive orders? What specifically are you looking for?
Yeah, I think we're talking about all of that. We've seen, as you mentioned, the Senate has stalled this process for months, and we can call it whatever you want to call it, Build Back Better, whatever it is that folks want to call it, but we just know that we need those investments, and we needed them yesterday. And we're really calling on the president and the Congress we know that the window of time to get this passed is maybe latest through the summer, and we're waiting. We're waiting. We need it to pass. We're bringing the energy. We backed the Biden in the election. We're ready to do it again, but we need this to pass, and we need them to do whatever it takes. If that means that the president leans in on executive orders, then that's how they should do it. But we're here to say do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah, whatever it takes. So you and your friends and associates and people associated with Climate Justice and the Center for Popular Democracy, you're going to be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow making these demands. What can the average person who's watching or listening to our program right now, what can they do to help or support?
Yeah, definitely join us if you're able to live in DC. We still have spaces on buses coming from cities across the country, all across the East Coast. So if you're like, I want to be there, I want to feel that energy, feel free to visit the Fight for Our Future landing page, and you'll be able to find a bus that'll get you here for little to no cost out of your own pocket. We also have about, last time I saw the map, we have 95 distributed events across the country happening. So you can also visit our big map and see if there's anything happening locally in your city or town. And then we also have 2 other marquee events happening in Georgia and Arizona, those being important states coming up in the upcoming midterm elections. And we want to really show up big there as well. There's thousands of people registered in those key marquee actions as well. So there's a ton of opportunity to get involved. You can also follow us live. There'll be a live Facebook streaming on CPD. If you want to access it through our Twitter channels or any other social media, you'll be able to watch it live. And the day will be exciting. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, everything from leaders of unions to Sierra Club to local frontline community organization leaders. There'll be musical performances, and it'll be a really beautiful day in DC. So definitely come out and support if this is also something that you want to see the White House deliver on.
Very cool. And spring in DC is absolutely spectacular. We're talking with Batamia Coronel, who is the senior national organizer for climate justice and the Center for Popular Democracy. What are the best websites for people to visit to find those events that you were talking about just a moment ago? You mentioned, Fight for Our Future. I hadn't mentioned their website. What websites do you recommend people check out?
Sure. There's Fight for Our Future. I'm just pulling up the exact
URL.
Fight for Our Future. I honestly don't know the name off the top of my head.
You can Google these things.
Yeah, you can definitely Google it. Fight for Our Future. You can also visit CPD's Twitter. We've been promoting the event, so Pop Democ on our Twitter handle. You can find all the information in the lead up. We're doing a really cool Q&A this evening. So if you have questions, a bunch of our partners that are participating are going to be in real time answering questions today at 7:00 Eastern. And that's where you can find all of our information.
That is absolutely great. Batamia Coronel, the senior national organizer with populardemocracy.org and cpdaction.org, and Pop Democ, POPDEMOC on Twitter, and CPD Action on Twitter. Batamia, thanks so much for dropping by. It's great talking with you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. It is coming up on 13 minutes past the hour here, and we'll be back in just a moment with Anything Goes Friday, picking up your phone calls on topics of popular interest, as they say in the radio business. Stick around. We'll be right back. It's the True People's Media, the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. Bill in Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind? That we're hearing from a lot of folks in Florida today. What's up?
Yeah. Hi, Tom, and a happy Friday to you.
Thank you. Back at you.
I just wanted to get your take on a couple of comments I want to make about the Ukraine tobacco. Mm-hmm. First off, Russia's goal was never to take over the entire country of Ukraine, and it blows my mind when I hear all these retired and paid-for generals throughout the lamestream media imply that was their ultimate goal.
Well, I think for a short time there, Putin thought he could pull it off. It didn't quite work out that way.
Well, what Russia's been saying, what I've been reading that they've been saying, is that what they want to destroy Ukraine's military infrastructure and to weaken their country as a whole with the goal of ensuring they never join NATO. And God knows what military assets they destroyed in the Kyiv area. Also, they want to take over the Donbass region, which looks like they are on the throes of doing. And they also, lastly, they also want a land bridge from Russia to Crimea, which looks like now they have already done. My gut is telling me that this conflict might end quicker than people think. That's just me. What do you think?
I think that there's a very real possibility. I mean, the British foreign minister, I believe it was, or maybe the defense minister, came out this morning and said that there's a very real chance that Russia could prevail in this war if you call the war Russia's attempt to seize the the east and the south, with the Donbass and the south along the sea there. And he may well be right. The question then is, can Russia hang on to those areas? Or are they going to have an insurgency? Is it going to be like the United States in Afghanistan for 20 years or Russia in Afghanistan for 20 years? And my guess is that they're going to have, unless they do like they did in Mariupol, where they literally just flatten the town, kill everybody, and then slowly rebuild it and repopulate it with Russians from Russia, which might be their plan. I mean, this might be what Putin's up to. It's certainly consistent with his behavior. But it seems to me like that's the only way over the long term that they'll be able to pull this thing off. But they did, when they took Crimea in 2014, I think part of the problem was the rest of the world was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Obama slapped some sanctions on them that were largely meaningless and gave a couple of speeches, but nobody really did anything. And, so Putin thinks he can continue with this. But whether he's going to be able to pull it off or not, I honestly don't know. I'm not a military scholar, Bill.
All right. Well, I just when I look at all this and I think of May 9th, they talk about May 9th in Russia.
Yeah, that's the July 4th.
And they might have all this done by then. I don't know.
That's his
Maybe
goal.
I'm wrong.
That's his goal. And that's why I think, a week ago, Putin was still talking about how Ukraine is not a real country, that it was created by the Soviet Union, that we need to reclaim it. It's all part of Russia. Quack, 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 quack. It has nothing to do with NATO. We just wanted to get our land back. Now, over the last 4 or 5 days, he's been talking about, well, all along, all we really wanted to do was recover Donbass and take the South, and we're going to do that now. I think that probably May 9th has a lot to do with that, Bill, and if he can nail all this stuff down by May 9th, he's going to have a great victory parade. But then I think he's going to continue trying to take the rest of Ukraine because, he's got this general who just came out and said, yeah, and after Ukraine, we're going after Moldova. So, they are not yet done. Yeah. Bill, thank you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Remember Paul Manafort? He used to be business partners with Roger Stone back in the day, working for Republican politicians like, Nixon and Reagan. Well, in 2004, he took a really sweet gig over in Ukraine, helping the Russians, President Putin, install Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine, a nice Putin puppet. That same year, though, the people of Ukraine said enough, and basically Yanukovych got driven out of the country. So they tried it again in 2010. Let's bring, this Putin puppet back into Ukraine, Yanukovych. And it worked until 2014 when they got kicked out. So he gets kicked out of Ukraine, Manafort. So what does he do the next year, 2015? He decides to run the Trump campaign. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Yeah, could be. Okay, there's an entire video that outlines this whole timeline over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 19 minutes past the hour. Anything Goes Friday is what we're doing here. And Robert in Roswell, New Mexico. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Got a question about Citizens United.
Go for it.
Corporations are persons. These persons are owned Are they slaves?
Yeah,
And if they're owned by foreign corporations or foreign persons, is any money they give to political parties subject to FARA?
Yeah.
Did they
the foreign lobbying act. Yeah, Robert, what you're doing and doing very well is pointing out the patent on its face absurdity of the Citizens United decision and the three decisions that preceded it, particularly Buckley and Bellotti back in the 70s. And these decisions and that people that in law schools they teach goes all the way back to 1886. These decisions are on their face absurd. To say that a corporation should have rights under the Constitution because they're a person. Yes, they're an artificial person at law. They have to pay taxes, they can own land, they can sign contracts. So they have to have some sort of personhood, but that's artificial personhood. Natural personhood gets you the right under the First Amendment to free speech and to refuse to speak. And corporations have now claimed that right under the First Amendment. Natural persons under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution have the right to privacy. And now corporations have claimed that right of privacy. The most famous case was almost 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, with Dow Chemical, when the EPA was flying airplanes over chemical factories with monitors on the bottom of the plane looking for leaks of poisons, of hexane and stuff like that. And they discovered that this one Dow Chemical, if I'm remembering correctly, it's in my book on equal protection, this one plant was just pumping out poison. And the company went to the Supreme Court and said, we're a person. We have a Fourth Amendment right to privacy. They invaded our privacy right. And the court said, you're right. And so now you have to announce inspections before you go into chemical factories. They claimed the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. And the Supreme Court backed them up. They've claimed the Sixth and Seventh Amendment rights to due process. None of these rights in the minds of the founders were being given to corporations. For that matter, corporations at the time the Constitution was signed in 1789 didn't even exist in their modern form. So yes, spot on. You said it very well, and I agree with you, Robert. It's nuts. And thank you, sir, very much for that call. Stephanie in Kankakee, Illinois. Hey, Stephanie, what's up? Stephanie?
Oh, hello. Hello?
Hey, yeah, you need to, I'm going to put you on hold and you can work this out with Joyce. Let's pick up Bobby in La Puente, California. Hey, Bobby, what's on your mind today?
Well, the messaging, the Pam called earlier, but prior to that, you gave me a laugh, Tom, before I get into that, what I'm going to talk about. McCarthy running to Mar-a-Lago, man, you had me fall out of my chair. And I was going to ask, I wonder if he put chapstick, McCarthy. I have no respect for those brown-nosed brigade. Brown-nosers, that's all they are.
Yep.
You can tell where they're at by walking. Hey, what's that brown spot? Anyway, the messaging, Pam is correct. Tom, did you ever remember that film, John Doe, with Gary Cooper?
I never saw it, Bobby. I'm sorry.
You never saw it.
I'm not a big movie person.
Hobos. Yes, the paper is a newspaper. They got these two guys, build them up, Gary Cooper as a candidate, Barbara Stanwyck, all over the country like Trump did, promising this, promising that, but the people believed it. Now, what I'm saying, what Biden has accomplished has to be put out there, like Pam says. Otherwise, nobody knows. You said 70% doesn't know, not aware.
That's right. The majority of Americans don't know that we have gained jobs since Joe Biden came into office. And we've gained more jobs, and we've had a higher growth in GDP than basically, with a couple of one-year exceptions, basically in the history of the United States. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. So, Bobby, I'm with you, and thank you so much for pointing that out. You're spot on. Very, very well said. Stephanie in Kankakee, Illinois. Hey, Stephanie, what's up?
Hey, I want to talk about the supply chain, and especially the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Americans understand that the American farmer does not feed America. The big, large corporate farmers in Illinois, they grow 0.2% worth of food. Everything else is soy, corn, and wheat.
It's animal food
on the market, right? And for a product. Now, the people who are feeding America are actually the small farmers. They call hobby farms, because you got less than 1,000 acres. And so we wouldn't have this food supply if we would do like we did back when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s. We bought our groceries and our fruits from local farmers.
Amen.
I remember Pembroke, Illinois, was given 70% of the produce came from Pembroke, Illinois, which is just 60 miles south of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, and they were basically black farmers. They were black farmers, and they sold to Chicago, all the way to Ohio and Michigan, and it worked because one of our food chains down here buys local. They love buying local farmers' food. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we would get back to not just making other products, if we could get back to making our farmers feed our own people.
This is one of the things that one of the lost histories of the Reagan administration, Stephanie. If you remember back, if you're old enough to remember the 80s, and you said, you remember the 50s and 60s, so I'm guessing you are, like I am, then you also remember Willie Nelson doing Farm Aid, all these crises that farmers were having in the 1980s. That all came out of Reagan in 1983, suspending all enforcement of the antitrust laws. And so what happened was these giant agricultural companies started manipulating commodity prices to put small farmers in a real squeeze, and then went around and offered to buy up their farms and let them continue living there, but now you're a tenant farmer, basically, a sharecropper. And that's what happened to the small farms all across the United States. My wife's grandmother had a 100-acre farm in Michigan, and same thing. I mean, this was just a nationwide trend in the 80s. We just have 20 seconds, but how do you think we come back from that?
Well, we're gonna have to tighten our belts a little, and we're gonna have to just start paying a little more for our groceries to get them from local farmers. Mm-hmm. And we're going to, because right now they're trying to put a pipeline through Pembroke, a gas line, knowing that the state is going 80% because it's black.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just have to fight our way back.
There you go. There you go. And we need to break up some of these giant ag companies too. Stephanie, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday.
This is the
Hinton, the subtitle, The Untold Story of Police Violence and Black Rebellion Since the 1960s. I'm reading from the introduction. On a cold Monday at the start of February, Joseph McNeil, Franklin McCain, Ezell Blair Jr., and David Richmond sat down at a whites-only lunch counter at Woolworth's in Greensboro, North Carolina. A waiter refused to serve the young men and suggested they order takeout instead. The four North Carolina A&T students remained at the counter. The store manager approached and asked them to leave. Still, they did not move. A police officer arrived, slapping his nightstick in his hand in an attempt to intimidate. Rather than allow the students' offense against Jim Crow to continue, the manager of the store closed the store for the day. 24 black students returned on Tuesday. Over 50 black students and 3 white students participated in the sit-in on the next day, Wednesday, February 3rd, 1960. News of the protests spread, and soon the sit-in movement had expanded to 55 cities and 13 states. By April, over 50,000 students were involved. Conceived and organized entirely by young people, the sit-in movement ultimately led to the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, SNCC, which was run by activists such as John Lewis and Stokely Carmichael. As a Fisk student, Lewis participated in the sit-ins in Nashville, Tennessee, and he would go on to steer the Freedom Riders in the summer of 1961 and speak at the March on Washington in 1963. Carmichael joined the sit-in movement as a high school student and would famously call for Black Power at the SNCC rally in Greenwood, Mississippi in 1966. Together, Lewis, Carmichael, and tens of thousands of other young black Americans signaled that their generation was prepared to risk their lives for freedom and equality. From Greensboro onward, the sit-ins helped build momentum and support for racial justice. The students in Greensboro engaged in a nonviolent protest to demand full integration, the right to vote, equal educational opportunities, decent jobs, protection against white supremacist terrorism, and an end to police violence. These were the central aims of the civil rights movement more broadly. By the end of the decade, black students at North Carolina A&T State University were still protesting, but now they were destroying property, assaulting police officers, and shooting in the direction of law enforcement, if not coming close to killing cops in self-defense. In May 1969, after black students at Greensboro's James B. Dudley High School were arrested, brutalized, and tear gassed by police during a series of protests against arbitrary disciplinary measures, A&T students came to the teenagers' defense. The confrontations between local police and black high school and college students led authorities to call the National Guard to A&T's campus, unleashing violence and repression that ended in the killing of sophomore Willie Grimes. A pivotal stop on the road to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, by the end of the decade, Greensboro was a site of sustained violence. It was far from unique in this regard. Between 1964 and 1972, but especially between 68 and 72, the United States endured internal violence on a scale not seen since the Civil War. Every major urban center in the country burned during those 8 years. Violence flared up not only in archetypal ghettos, including Harlem and Watts, and in majority black cities such as Detroit and Washington, D.C. It appeared in Greensboro, North Carolina, in Gary, Indiana, in Seattle, Washington, and countless places in between. Every city, small or large, where black residents lived in segregated, unequal conditions. In the North and the South, the East and the West, the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt, black people threw rocks and bottles at police, shot at them with rifles, smashed the windows of businesses and institutions, hurled firebombs, and plundered local stores. These events, what we commonly call riots, or what people who are to the left of center sometimes refer to as civil disturbances, caused hundreds of millions of dollars of property damage. Most immediately, they shaped the lives of the store owners whose businesses were destroyed, of the parents who lost their teenage sons to the police, and of the firefighters and cops who were harmed or killed. But ever since, Americans have been living in a nation and a national culture created in part by the extreme violence of the 1960s and the early 1970s. The aftershocks of that era have, at times, taken the form of mass violence to which all Americans have been witness. In Miami in 1980, in Los Angeles in 1992, in Cincinnati in 2001, and in more recent years, in Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, Maryland, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. The enduring impact of the violence of the 60s and 70s has been felt more regularly and more acutely by black people in American cities who faced new policing practices that emerged under the banner of the war on crime. The routine stop and frisks that attacked people's dignity, the breaking up of community gatherings, the presence of armed, uniformed officers in the hallways of under-resourced public schools, and more. Such strategies help repress mass violence as a regular phenomenon, but they ironically make further riots inevitable. Those strategies remain in place today. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero-emission by 2040, and said, okay, what will happen? if we do this. They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable. The American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. It's Anything Goes, Friday, 35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. A lot to talk about. And Cindy in Marina, California. Hey, Cindy, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hi. Remember when they did the hydrogen collider and they wanted to split the atom?
Okay.
And we never heard out what happened about that because it was just some science being done underground. And then we heard about Fauci and his scientific inhumane experiments on beagle puppies. And it's weird how they are so blatantly duplicit and
who's the they you're talking about? And I know nothing about Fauci's experiments. What
about
who is this
the water
they that you're talking about?
poisoned with lead in Detroit? Remember that?
I do. What's the point you're trying to make?
That was when
Cindy?
they decided that they could deregulate.
Right.
And when they started to deregulate, the first thing they did was start dumping toxins in the water, lead, and it was giving brain damage.
Yeah.
They had lead in the paint. So we have a society that has been bullied by corporations for a long time. It's like profits over people.
Largely forever. I get it. Cindy, thank you. Henry in Fairview, Oregon. Hey, Henry, what's on your mind?
Tom, I think you're kind of misleading people a little bit about Biden and his infrastructure tour that he's on right now to try to lift his numbers. And I do agree with you about the fact that he's getting a bad rap about the employment numbers. Yes, they are historical and they should be prominently displayed. That is true, but I think that it is failed leadership and it is failed messaging because he doesn't. Because the problem is that he didn't get BBB passed. The BBB passed, and he didn't
get BBB passed, Henry, because you had 100%, all 50 of the Republicans in the United States Senate were dancing to the tune of the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
This is the most corrupt, bought-off political party in the history of the United States. They are embracing open fascism. They are trashing gay people and trans kids. They have no shame whatsoever, these people. And you want to talk about Joe Biden, messing up? Take it someplace else. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind?
Well, happy Earth Day, Tom, and
thank you. Back at you.
Thank you, and thanks to you and your team for all that you do, shining a light on the climate and environmental emergencies bearing down on us. So, and today's discussion on fascism, it's really not unrelated to Earth Day. Yesterday, you mentioned Brazil's former president Lula, who's apparently pushing vegetarianism, which is great. And imagine, rather than being falsely imprisoned a few years ago, if he would have been able to run against and defeat Bolsonaro, consider how much destruction of the rainforest.
Well, he might this year.
Yeah, well, and I think he'll win. But all the last few years, look at all the destruction of the rainforest that's happened that could have been averted. So, besides preserving our forests, we do need to stop all new fossil fuel infrastructure from being built. And I would say that includes Biden's plan to ship LNG to Europe. Let's send them electric heat pumps instead. But having said that, Tom, I do want to slightly disagree with you about DeSantis. I think he's an efficient little dictator, and yeah, if you want to see what a GOP victory in 2024 will mean for America, then of course look at today's Florida. But to me, the most clear and present danger to American democracy is still Donald Trump. Last Friday, Common Dreams had a great piece titled November 2022, The Anti-Democracy Coalition by Stephen Harper. And Mr. Harper, he gives chilling details about this America First Secretary of State coalition, which is led by this anti-Semite Jim Marchant, who's quoted as saying, quote, "I can't stress enough how important the Secretary of State offices are. I think they are the most important elections in our country in 2022. And why is that? We control the election system. In 2022, we're going to take back our country," end quote. Right. And, you know, and Ayman Mohyeldin, I think he was filling in for Chris Hayes last night, Tom. I don't know if you saw it, but, you know, he had Dana Nessel on, the AG of Michigan. And Trump's going after the AGs, the attorney generals, too, because they're the ones that defend the elections.
And it's not just Trump, Jeff. It's not like he's some evil mastermind. He can barely get out of his own way. But this is the Republican Party now.
But I think we underestimate Trump at our own peril.
I agree.
I think you know, it's like in sports. You don't want to look past the game that is coming up next to a future game, which might be DeSantis. But right now, you know, Trump still holds a lot of sway over this fascist party. And you know, and if people want to, you know, besides looking at what's going on in Florida, if people want to see a fascist future, what a fascist future in America looks like, that HBO series we've talked about before, The Plot Against America, it's worth revisiting. And just imagine Trump as the Charles Lindbergh figure and Putin as the Hitler figure. You know, it's kind of portends a
if you subscribe
future.
to HBO and you have not yet watched this program, it's a beautiful historical set piece. It takes place in the 1940s or maybe 30s, and it's just brilliant. The Plot Against America.
It really,
yeah.
Yes, and so you know we got to get to work on this 2022 election, and it starts with the primaries. You know, we want to get as many progressive candidates elected as possible. So, you know, let's defeat Kurt Schrader in the primary here in Oregon.
There you go. Yeah, step one. Jeff, thank you for the call. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, good afternoon. Something I wanted to talk about was I've noticed that in most of our political discussions, we always address issues separately. And I would think it'd be more honest and more instructive if we discussed issues together. For example, affordable housing, flat wages or suppressed wages, and then high levels of immigration. I think they're all related, but we don't want to address it. You know, and conservatives do the same thing. But I think one affects the other, and we have to address it that way instead of putting everything in little boxes and not seeing the big picture. That's my initial comment.
Okay. How are those affordable housing, immigration, and you said high levels.
Right.
I mean, we actually have fairly low levels of immigration now.
Well, how many a year are we letting in legally? 1 million, right? About 1 million?
No. It was well under that before Trump, and he ratcheted it down to a few tens of thousands, and now I think it's in the neighborhood of 100,000, 200,000 a year. And you say letting in. These are people who are applying for asylum. They have to go through a legal process. Over 95% of them show up for their hearings, and more often than not, they end up getting deported. So it's to talk about immigration in those terms is to mischaracterize what's going on, Brian.
Well, I think another dishonesty I hear on the right.
Other than
all the time.
other than the language of, oh my God, there's brown people coming into the United States. I mean, which sells on the right, I suppose. But what's your point for democratic messaging? I'm missing something here.
Well, I mean, we have to say, like, I used to be in a labor union. I'm retired now, and I know the history of organized labor in the United States. And one of the key tools that business owners use to break the union, or if a union was forming to undercut it, was to bring in busloads of new immigrants from Ellis Island. That's how they would kill the unions, because you bring in more poor, desperate people to take the jobs that aren't going to be, fussing
You're talking about
safety
prior to
and lunch break.
1927.
Right. But the same thing goes on. Like, I've worked in construction my whole life, okay? When I started out in the late 70s, Hispanics were maybe 10, 20%, maybe, in Chicagoland. Now it's, 50, 60, 70%. You go to the southern part of the United States, and all the housing basically is all done by illegal immigrants, all of it.
Yeah, I get that, and that's why I have been saying for a long time that I think the Democrats are missing the boat in this debate by not talking about illegal employers, because that's if somebody's coming to this country because they are fearing for their lives. And when you think of what's involved in leaving your country, what would force Brian to take his family and put all of your possessions, Brian, in one suitcase or one backpack and go to another country and never come back? I mean, what would it have to take to do that? You consider somebody under those circumstances, and that's pretty terrible. But on the other hand, there's another class of folks who try to get into the United States because they can get a job. And they want to send money back home, and they want to make their lives better. I understand all that, but that's a whole different category of person. And we need to be dealing with these as separate things. And the brilliance of the Republican bigotry machine is that they have conflated the two. They are constantly referring to refugees as immigrants when they're not. They're refugees, asylum seekers. And they're constantly referring to immigrants as people who are stealing your jobs when nobody's stealing your job. Your employer is giving it away. We have illegal employers in the United States, and we need to crack down on illegal employment. And if you did that, you would no longer have people crossing the border because they're looking for a job. Then you're just dealing with people who are crossing the border because they're being forced off their farms in Guatemala by drought and or violence in El Salvador. There are things that we can do in that part of the world to ameliorate those problems. But we've got to separate these two issues from each other if we're going to have a reasonable conversation about it. And that leads you to, comprehensive immigration reform.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Which Republicans refuse to discuss and Democrats are too timid to discuss, frankly. It's 46 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Lee in Milwaukee, Oregon. Hey, Lee, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I got a slick, glossy mailed flyer from Kurt Schrader, the conservative big pharma tool running for re-election in Oregon's 5th District, right? And thought you might like to get a quick description of it.
Okay, tell me what he's saying.
On the front, you see a senior citizen holding up her bottle of prescription meds. It says, he's taken on the drug companies to bring your medication costs down. Then you open it up, and it says, Kurt Schrader, the go-to voice to get things done to lower prescription drug prices, wrote and passed the plan allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. That's either false or a big distortion.
It is.
And then on the back, you see Democrat Kurt Schrader's progressive scorecard. This guy is spending millions to remake his image and lie and distort about his record. And we should vote for
Jamie McLeod Skinner.
Yeah. She is a progressive running against this guy, and we're going to have another wasted Democrat representing us if we don't get rid of this guy.
Yeah, you said he's spending money on these, and that may be, but my guess is that the pharmaceutical industry is spending money on these things. I mean, he's got a certain, he's an heir to one of the pharmaceutical fortunes, so you can understand where he's coming from, but still. Enough already. Yeah, I'm with you. Lee, thanks for that. Thanks for the heads up on it. That's amazing. Mac in Gig Harbor, Washington. Hey, Mac, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, the First Amendment rights are on my mind. As far as the media is concerned, we Democrats can't get the message out. And, for boomers like my wife and I, we're used to the news was kind of sacrosanct because it was just news. Right. And now it's entertainment. And there are basically no strings. So you can have, Fox have Tucker Carlson on and say this is Fox News. And I don't know how it would be done with the Democrats, since they don't really have control of their caucus. The FTC could, in some way, say that if you yell fire in a crowded theater over the air in any regard, that it has to be labeled as that, not allowed to be called news.
Well, you're getting into some really, really delicate territory there, Mac, because what's my news may not be your news, and the minute that we give the government and I realize I'm sounding like an old line conservative here, and maybe in this regard I am, but the minute that you give the government the power to decide what is the news, you are laying the foundation for Donald Trump or somebody like him to come in and say, okay, I'm going to tell you now what the news is. That you're heading straight for TASS and Pravda.
I get that. My wife and I go over this all the time, but I just look at the fact that these people are able to build a narrative that they're presenting as legit and true when it's outright fabrication.
The way that this was treated legally, I'm with you, and forgive the interruption, but we're hitting a break here. The way this was treated prior to 1987 was with a phrase called programming in the public interest. It didn't say the news has to be news. It said radio and television stations have to program in the public interest. And that caused the radio and television networks to create basically nonprofit news divisions. They did not make a profit. And I think that's what we need to go back to, Mac, and I think that's a little more easily defined. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. 9 minutes before the hour, Anything Goes Friday. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I don't know if anybody else has seen this, but here in Alabama, we have an ad with Trump telling people to get out and register to vote and protect their vote so that we can protect our country and elect the right people. Anybody got that ad showing?
I've not seen it.
Yeah, okay. Well, the ad's here for the Republican Party. Our governor, her name is Kay Ivey. She's, I think, 76 or something. But she's running on the fact that she's outlawed CRT, and that she's also outlawed illegal curbside voting, and that she's not going to allow anybody and their neighbor and their cousin to get themselves a absentee ballot either. And she says that she supports Trump. Well, the woman running against her is a 100% Trump supporter and a good Christian. And these ads are, you would not believe it. If you
this
want
is
to watch
the Republican primary you're talking about, Norma.
Yeah, it's May the 24th. The station that shows most of the stuff is WSFA Channel 12. Comes on at 5 Central Time and 6 Central Time if you want to watch this stuff. If you can pull it up online. But this is anybody that actually believes this stuff, like CRT is only taught as a third-level law school class as an elective, and you have to ask for it. It's not taught anywhere else in the country. It never has been. I don't understand why people don't know this. Because I guess
I don't think they care, Norma. I think the Republicans, they know that they're lying through their teeth. But basically, what these Republicans are saying to white people is we're going to just basically erase the crimes of white people from the map, from the history, from American history. And, we'd all like to, the lost cause pitch back in the 1880s, this whole movement that started in 1910 to put, Confederate monuments all over the United States. It's all about the same thing. It's all about creating a great forgetting, a giant memory hole about what happened here in the United States.
Yeah, I know. And when I go out and I'm talking to people, I make a point of telling people what is going on here with our Public Service Commission because they don't know. A raise in power, gas, water, sewage, and telephone, communication cost. And my bill went up 35% this month. And, that includes my DirecTV, so I can see your smiling face. Go ahead and smile at me, Tom.
I don't make any money from DirecTV, so.
I know, but, I watch it. I have it so I can watch you.
Yeah.
But, everything that goes on in this country is controlled by these corporations. And, you said there are 6 people who voted not to sanction Russia. Okay. Are they on the same list as 11 who went to Russia?
No, those were senators. This was Thomas Massie and Paul Gosar and a couple of others. I forget the whole list.
Well, does anybody remember the 11 that went to Russia for the 4th of July secret meeting? And we never
Ron
knew
Johnson was at the top of that list.
Yeah. Are these the same people? Do these people work for Russia? We have people I truly believe work for China. There are people I believe work for Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And I'd like to see an all-American single citizenship papered Congress. I'm sick and tired of people in there with double citizenships or triple citizenships working for supposedly us, the people.
It would be good to have a law that says, that contradicts Citizens United and says that foreign entities cannot fund campaigns. I'm with you. Norma, thank you so much. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
The immediately previous caller touched on kind of what I intended on saying. Basically, it's that at least since the Cheney-Bush administration and also Daddy Bush and Reagan, it seemed to me that the right in this country, Republicans, have a much larger, all-encompassing and well-planned worldview than Democrats do. It always seems like Democrats are 2 steps behind, a day late and a dollar short. Beginning with that project for the new American century and the unitary executive and all these things.
Yep.
And the continuing embrace.
It's authoritarianism and neo-fascism.
Yeah,
Let's call it what it is.
Embrace with politicians and heads of state in other countries who have the same mindset. And like the lady just said, the Republicans who went to Moscow on our Independence Day,
right.
and the Conservative Political Action Committee.
Yeah. George, I got to wrap it up here. I'll give you
what I'm saying is Putin invading Ukraine right now to coordinate with our Republicans and take the heat off them? And
I think that's a side benefit. I think it's a whole long story. I got to wrap the show up. I'm sorry. Hey, special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Hawley, Joyce the Hammer, Nance, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick White, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabberwocky, Jay LeBlanc, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verde, and Al Gorilla Rhythm. Thank you. And thank you to you. Have a great weekend. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. We'll see you on Monday. Have a wonderful time.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann
Program.
For audio and video archives, visit
the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at CozyEarth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmanReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.